across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Unsurprisingly, Iran is our main story today. Right through until 1 o'clock, we're going to bring you what is happening, what has happened in the last 36 hours, what it all means for us in the UK, and what it means for the region too. We've got top guests in Dubai, in Israel, here in the UK as well. Richard Tice, the Deputy Leader of Reform UK, will join us in a second, as will the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Priti Patel. Will be reflecting on what the Americans and what the British and many other countries are saying and doing about this emerging, developing situation. Of course, I want your views on it too. 0344 499 1000. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a WhatsApp voice note 0344 499 1000. You can send me a WhatsApp text message on that main number, or give me a ring on the main number, which is, of course, 0344 499 1000. For the last time on a Sunday, keep it talk right through until 1 o'clock with me, Peter Cardwell. What an astonishing 36 hours for this country, but particularly for Iran and particularly for the Middle East. Dramatic, life-changing things have happened for so many people. It was exactly a week ago that I had the great privilege of speaking after my Sunday show in London, in Whitehall, to Iranian people, to people who wanted the removal of Ayatollah Khomeini. He is now dead and gone, and what happens next is something that is filled with hope. Yes, there will be more deaths. Yes, there will be more bloodshed. But we also know that Khomeini is dead, and hopefully the regime will topple very, very soon. A brutal, horrendous, awful regime that I was privileged to talk about and show my solidarity with people who are against it, people who have been horribly, horribly repressed, people who have fled from Iran to this country. And I spoke to them last Sunday. For 2.5 years on my programmes, particularly my weekend programmes, I've been highlighting the anti-Semitism, the Islamist terror that has been sponsored by Iran. I have been privileged to give space to freed hostages on my programmes, bereaved families, campaigners, military experts, politicians. All of what has happened since the 7th of October in Israel in 2023 leads back to what happened yesterday. The death of Khomeini, the inevitable collapse of their regime, which will hopefully happen very, very soon. It won't stop Islamist terrorism. It won't stop anti-Semitism in the UK, the US, or Europe. But killing the poisonous and dangerous root of Islamist terror will greatly weaken the movement we see in mosques, we see in our streets, and sadly, we see in Parliament too. What happens in Iran matters a huge amount, not just there, not just for the region, but for the UK as well. The regime exported terrorism. We saw a journalist stabbed by the Iranian regime on our streets. We know that there are those sympathetic to the regime who were protesting yesterday in support of their regime. One of them was the deputy leader of the Green Party, Mohsen Ali, which is almost unbelievable, yet unfortunately all too real. Iran exported terrorism and hate, which is evident on our streets every day. Those militant pro-Palestinian protesters with their rabid anti-Semitism, sponsored by Iran. That same rabble are now marching around with placards and chants supporting their regime and eulogising Khomeini. Look at the loudest and most hysterical voices condemning the attack on Iran. Jeremy Corbyn, Zara Sultana, the Green Party and their deputy leader, Mohsen Ali. These people want to destroy Britain. They hate our way of life. What is happening right now might seem very far away. It's not, because there are a lot of people in the region from here. There are a lot of people who are tourists, business people in Dubai and many of the other areas that have been bombed, for example. There are lots of our friends and indeed viewers and listeners in that region too, including in Israel as well, and they're under attack too. There are lots of people in Iran who hold the same values that we hold dear at this station, that we have to remain in solidarity with over the next few days, weeks, months, and yes, years too. There's so much to talk about today, and the first person I'm going to talk to is Richard Tice in just a second, but I want to remind you first how this all started, what President Trump said nearly 36 hours ago.
A short time ago, the United States military began major combat operations in Iran. Our objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime, a vicious group of very hard, terrible people. Its menacing activities directly endanger the United States, our troops, our bases overseas, and our allies throughout the world.
Of course, there's been huge reaction right around the world, including from our Prime Minister, although we were something of a bystander in all of this. I'll get into that with Richard Tice in a second. Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, said this.
Iran can end this now. They should refrain from further strikes, give up their weapons programs, and cease the appalling violence and repression against the Iranian people, who deserve the right to determine their own future in line with our long-standing position. This is the route to de-escalation and back to the negotiating table.
The Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, and the Defence Secretary, John Healey, has been speaking to Sky News this morning too.
I think few people will mourn the Ayatollah's death, not least the family and friends of those thousands of young protesters murdered on the streets of Iranian cities. I mean, Iran and the regime he's led for so long, it's a source of evil, murdering its own citizens and sponsoring and exporting terror, including to countries like Britain.
That's the Defence Secretary, John Healey, speaking to Sky News this morning. We'll be speaking to the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Priti Patel, a little bit later on in this programme. Now I want to speak to the Deputy Leader and indeed Business and Trade and Energy Spokesman for Reform UK, Richard Tice MP. Richard, good morning.
Good morning, Peter. What a historic weekend for you to have your last Sunday show. This is a potentially sort of 1 in 50-year moment that we are experiencing, and I think that we should, there'll be some bumps in the road for sure, but we must all hope and pray that this will lead to a much, much more stable situation in the Middle East and the wider world. And I just want to put it absolutely out there that the Iranian regime have been not just an imminent threat, but a permanent threat to the British people and our interests. And what the Americans and the Israelis have done, I want to thank them. We at Reform support them fully. And we are appalled at the gutless cowardice of this Prime Minister and this Labour government, who yesterday, the Prime Minister, he did his utmost to reassure his Islamist friends that he wanted nothing to do with the US or the Israeli action. And when he referred to defending allies, he couldn't bring himself to say that those allies included the Israelis and the US. Utterly shameful.
I find it quite strange that the Prime Minister, yes, he spoke yesterday, but then he does a joint statement with the French and Germans. I wonder why he does that necessarily, why he feels he can't just put out his own thoughts on this unilaterally, and also talk about why this was the right course of action to take. He will hide behind international law. In fact, we have Zach Polanski, the leader of the Green Party this morning. His deputy, by the way, was at a pro-regime protest yesterday, Mothan Ali. I expect you've seen that. Zach Polanski has said this was illegal and unprovoked. This is the law of the jungle. That's an end to international law. It's quite astounding. We have a Prime Minister that
But it's worse than that. Zach, I call him Zach Idiotsky, actually. He described the US as a rogue state. I mean, he is just a clear and present danger to UK politics. But let's just be absolutely clear about this. The Iranian regime, they have supported through their proxies horrific terror groups like the Houthis who've attacked British shipping interests, like Hamas, who have, through the horror of October the 7th and other attacks, attacked our Israeli friends and also British citizens in and around Israel. They've supported Hezbollah. They've supported extremist ideology on the streets of the United Kingdom. The PM yesterday did admit that some 20 potentially lethal attacks have been undertaken by the Iranian regime on UK soil in the last 12 to 18 months or so, confirmed by MI5. And yet people try and blather and bluster.
Do you worry about the potential?
What a load of nonsense.
Do you worry about the potential of those who are perhaps regime members fleeing Iran, going to places like Russia, China, maybe even here in the UK as well? Because I worry that a haven may be given to some of those people because they have a lot of money and they'll take a lot of assets out of Iran.
Peter, the world has always been full of challenges, and we have to deal with those. But this is a moment of opportunity where we should actually be supporting the US and Israel, thanking them for removing any form of nuclear or military capability from Iran, who, by the way, want to destroy our close democratic ally, Israel, in the Middle East. And we should make it clear to all of those fomenting anti-Semitism and undermining British values in our universities and elsewhere in the UK, we will not tolerate it. We will root you out, and hopefully we will kick you out. We need to be strong and robust and make it absolutely clear we don't want any of this extremist ideology on the streets of the UK from here on.
And what do you think happens now in the region? Because the regime is still there, albeit weakened, certainly. The IRGC, the Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, naming a new commander-in-chief because so many of them have been killed by these strikes. Absolutely no tears from me on that, and Khamenei is gone. And actually, Putin has responded this morning, says it was a cynical murder of Khamenei. He said that he sent his condolences to President Masoud Pezeshkian and said that Khamenei's assassination is a violation of all standards of human morality and international law.
Well, that's a bit rich coming from him.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I mean, look, the point is that there will be, of course, there'll be bumps in the roads. No one's saying it's going to be easy, but it is absolutely the right course of action. Looking to the medium and long term, this gives we believe, a much greater prospect of peace and stability across the whole of the Middle East that so many tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people have been hoping and praying for. And the courage of President Trump and the Israeli government in taking this on, taking the brave, courageous, difficult decisions, that this is essential actually to ensure that that peace and stability. I repeat, there'll be some difficult moments. It's one of the regrettable factors of when you have to deal with such a brutal regime. But this is a moment where we can see a way to frankly, a better situation for us. And it's notable, isn't it? The Canadians, the Australians have given their support to the US and Israeli action. And our Prime Minister cowardly cowers in the corner because he's worried about losing some of his more sort of hard left, hard socialist and Islamist votes.
What should he do? What would your advice to him be?
He should be offering his full support to the US. What he's actually done, we believe that he has refused access to UK bases and refused access to Diego Garcia for these attacks. He's actually dramatically, significantly undermined the special relationship with the US. He will have destroyed confidence and trust by the US administration in Washington, in the UK. They will now view us as weak cowards in the corner, not to be trusted when the chips are down, when big, important geopolitical decisions need to be taken. Well, that's the reason why when a reform government comes along, we can restore that trust and confidence in the UK.
Just before you go, Richard, I want to ask you about two things quite briefly. One was the by-election on Thursday. Reform came second, and you have a new policy now in regard to postal voting in this country. I think all of this is kind of linked, actually, because there are people in this country who do not believe in democracy, do not believe in the rule of law, and have been subverting that democracy. And that's not Reform UK necessarily saying that. That is independent observers of what went on Thursday. If we were going to safeguard what it is to be British, what would Reform UK do in regard to voting?
Well, first of all, there were clear breaches confirmed by the independent observers, the democracy volunteers, about what's called family voting, which is basically another family member, most normally you could expect a man, going into the polling booth alongside a female and telling her how to vote. I saw it literally on the streets where a woman, she was terrified to talk to me, and she said, I can't deal with this matters. It's all for my husband to decide. That was common across the whole of the campaign. And we've also announced that actually we should only allow British citizens to vote in British elections. We should not allow Commonwealth citizens, such as those from Pakistan and elsewhere, to vote in British elections when they might be basing that vote on non-British issues. We've seen the consequences of that, and other nations don't allow that. By the way, Pakistan doesn't allow British citizens to vote in Pakistan elections, so why on earth should we allow the reverse? It's ridiculous, and that's why we've ended up in the pickle we're in. And as for postal voting, of course, if you are disabled, infirm, or serving overseas, but general postal voting, I'm afraid, is the subject of significant abuse and more sort of family coercion in certain.
Coming from Northern Ireland, Richard, the rules on postal voting are very, very tight for very obvious historical reasons. In fact, there was a joke, vote early, vote often, so I totally support what Reform UK wants to do with that particular aspect of voting. And just finally, Richard, one thing that the government would very conveniently want us to forget and not talk about this morning, but I think at least one question to you this morning is valid, about Josh Simons, the Cabinet Office Minister, who has resigned. This is something a lot of people will have missed, but actually it comes back to those fundamental values about freedom of the press, for example, freedom of speech, because there were Sunday Times journalists who were targeted by the organisation he used to head, Labour Together. There has been an inquiry and he has resigned. What's your reaction to that?
Well, finally, after a week of blathering and bluster, he's done the right thing. He was head of Labour Together when this occurred, where essentially he organised a specific sort of report and investigation into journalists to try and smear and label them. And the whole week in Parliament, they've been trying to sort of duck and dive around this. And although he was cleared of specific breaches of the ministerial code, just basic decency, integrity and common sense said that he couldn't remain in office. And they buried bad news on this weekend amongst all of the other significant geopolitical noise.
Richard, thank you for speaking to me this morning, and all I would say on my final Sunday is that I took over this show from a great broadcaster, and I know it's being handed over to another great broadcaster who's a friend of us both, Alex Phillips. So Richard, brilliant. Thank you for that.
You've done brilliantly, Peter.
We will talk soon, no doubt, on my evening shows between 7 and 10. Thank you, Richard. Much appreciated. Richard Tice there, Deputy Leader of Reform UK. A few breaking lines as well. The third and final member has been appointed to Iran's Temporary Leadership Council, which fulfills the role of the Supreme Leader until a successor is chosen. Let's hope there's no opportunity for a successor to be chosen. Let's hope the regime falls. So Ayatollah Ali Reza Arafi was appointed as the jurist member of Iran's Leadership Council. He was a preacher and writer before being confirmed to the Assembly of Experts, one of the bodies that decides the next Supreme Leader. Let's hope all this is irrelevant. Let's hope this means that that this all falls very, very soon, and the people of Iran can take back their country. And the president of Iran, Masoud Pezeshkian, says the assassination of Khamenei is an open war against Muslims, especially Shiites, in all corners of the world. This is a statement published on the official Telegram channel of the Iranian government. He says Iran considers bloodshed and revenge against the perpetrators and instigators of this historical crime as its legitimate duty and right, and will do its utmost to fulfil this great responsibility and duty. Usual bluff and bluster from them. Karen in Bournemouth is our first caller of the day. She's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Karen, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say this morning?
Well, good morning, Peter.
Good morning.
One of the things I'd like to say is that people are comparing it to Iraq and Afghanistan, but what they're not taking into consideration is that we didn't have the Abrahamic Accords. That's
a very good point. It's a very good point.
Which will make a huge difference in Iran itself. And I also think that they'd better stop the boats now, because the only people that will be leaving Iran will be the IRGC, and they'll all be headed here.
Well, it's really interesting you mentioned that, Karen. I wasn't there for any reason other than I was at a birthday party, but I was just very close to the American embassy in London last night, and there were 3 or 4 Iranians there who were standing in solidarity with the people of Iran, and they were saying, I said, what are you going to do now? I said, well, we want to go back to Iran. That's what we want to do. And so much of the cheering, so much of the singing of so many people, we're going to talk about that actually with Phil Dave in a minute or two, was down at some of those celebrations last night. Some of it is
interestingly enough,
they shout and sing about going back to Iran and say we want to go back to your homeland. Yeah,
but the other interesting thing is, unfortunately it was on another channel, but I was listening to Dennis Healy, and he's now trying to claim that we are leading in the defence of stuff.
I think you mean John Healy, yeah.
John Healy. Saying we are playing a leading part in the defence of bases and things now, which is complete and utter crap, because they just cowardised out and decided that they were going to back their Muslim vote. And if they don't now, because I think they'll be forced to now, is declare the IRGC a terrorist organisation.
Should have done it long ago, Karen. Yeah.
I know they should have done, but they haven't. But I think they'll be left with absolutely no choice now.
Well, listen, thank you for that, Karen. Great common sense spoken there on the Abraham Accords. Very, very interesting. They were a real feat of diplomacy that brought so many Middle Eastern countries together and solved so many of the problems. And actually, there will be real solidarity with Israel from many of those countries, and certainly Iran, and the Iranian people anyway are people who are very grateful. The ones I was speaking to last night, very grateful to what Israel and to what the United States have done. We'll go to the debate desk in a second. Andy Williams will be with us, as will Phil Dave, and Phil was actually at some of the celebrations that happened in London last night. Samara Gill there as well. She has a report that's coming up a bit later in the programme. We've got the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Priti Patel, coming up too. Loads of guests right through until 1 o'clock, including the return of an old favourite with a little bit of light relief at the very, very end of the programme, as I say goodbye to the Sunday programmes, as I'm taking over the evening programme 7 till 10, Monday to Friday. Lots to discuss today, though. Get in touch. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Debate desk next.
the party is dishonest because they campaigned in different ways to different communities. To woke progressives, they were banging on about trans rights and legalising all drugs, including crack cocaine and heroin, and the idea that they would open the borders and legalise prostitution. So that was the offer to the progressive left. Meanwhile, they're doing campaign literature to the Muslim community, talking about Gaza, not mentioning trans rights, which is anathema.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Schools, universities and businesses in Tehran have all been shut because of what is going on. Iranian state media have confirmed the death of the Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. This is what happened.
After a lifetime of Hosseini struggle, unceasing and untiring, with a lofty and celestial spirit like the steadfast mountain of the Islamic guardianship, the compassionate father of kindness and resolve, the leader and imam of the Muslims, His Eminence Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Hosseini Khamenei, on the path of upholding the exaltation of the sacred sanctuary of the Islamic Republic of Iran, drank the sweet, pure draught of martyrdom and joined the supreme heavenly kingdom.
That is obviously entirely impartial journalist on Iranian state media crying there because the compassionate father Ali Khamenei has been rightly sent to martyrdom. I mean, just this clip just typifies the absolute propaganda, the brainwashing of people in Iran and what has been attempted. So imagine you're seeing that on your TV every single day, that kind of absolute nonsense about a compassionate father. This was a brutal, repressive dictator who killed millions of people, but even in the last few weeks, tens of thousands of people who resisted him. An absolutely disgusting, horrible leader who is rightly gone. I will shed absolutely no tears for him. Yet this is what Iranian state media does. This is just, I just wanted to show you some of the absurdity of what is going on in Iran. And imagine you're showing that every day, yet still, you know that's nonsense. You know that is absolute nonsense. And you still go out on the streets and you protest and you celebrate that death and you try to resist this awful, awful regime. There have been people, of course, mourning him, and we can see some of them on the screen at the moment. I am absolutely not one of them. To get reaction, I want to go to another lofty and celestial being, Andy Williams, who is with me in the studio now. Phil Dave joining us in just a minute. Andy, we know that various people have been put into a sort of interim council in Iran. Let's hope that's all irrelevant. Let's hope that all just disintegrates very, very soon. Your hot take on this?
Well, I mean, you've said it already. A horrific, despotic, borderline medieval regime that we hope will fall in the coming days and weeks. I don't think we can underestimate how seismic this is, not just in the context of today or this week's news, but in the last several decades, the last century even. I think the 1979 revolution was one of the defining moments of the 20th century, and not in a good way. We talk a lot in the West about moments like the end of the Cold War or 9/11, both of which were huge. But the Iranian Revolution and the impact that's had on the destabilization of the Middle East and the wider world has been one of the most significant moments in that period. And if this is indeed the start of the fall of that regime and a move towards a country of 93 million people having something that looks a lot more like democracy, something that looks a lot more like Western liberal values and a chance to vote, God forbid, and not be sent to their death for defying the regime. And also... I'm
not wearing a headscarf.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm against theocracies of all kinds, and this is a particularly nasty one. So I think that's it's a very, very good thing.
Well, we're going to hear from Phil Dave in a second. We would have heard from him now, but someone was out last night celebrating in North London and got us some really good footage, which we'll show, and maybe overslept a little bit. But he's here in just a moment. Andy will be joined by Phil Dave on the debate desk in just a second. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, Rip Van Winkle, aka Phil Dave, joins us in the studio now.
Oh, is that the time? Good heavens. Wow.
Phil, you overslept a little bit this morning, and that's fine because you're a busy boy last night. We'll get to that in a second. But give me your reaction to this.
Where do I start? I mean, what an amazing day in history yesterday was. Seriously, I don't actually think people can appreciate the magnitude of what yesterday meant, because yes, of course, it's an amazing day for true Iranian people, who I might refer to as Persian people, but it was better than that. It was actually an amazing day for the world over, because the truth is, I don't think people realise the devastating impact that the Iranian regime has had on the Western world. We are talking about the masterminds behind the likes of 9/11, the 7/7 attacks, not to mention the October incident in Israel, and all of this stuff. You know, you may look and you say, all right, fair enough, if you're listening somewhere else in the world and it's not affected you, why does it bother me? These are the kind of people who want fundamentalist Islam to take over the world. It is just as simple as that, and the fact that the head of the snake has gone is just amazing.
It is fascinating to see what has happened. It's fascinating to see what is happening now. What are your hopes for what happens next? Because the regime is still there.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't think the Iranian people should lose sight of what lies ahead of them now, because just because the number one has been extinguished, thank goodness, unfortunately there are still very many individuals there who follow the Ayatollah, the late Ayatollah's beliefs, if you like, and also sort of wants to try and carry on his, in inverted commas, good work. So they must not lose sight of the fact that they have got a little bit of uprising left to do.
And the new IRGC commander, often seen as someone who's worse and even more repressive and more cracking down on people. So there is danger ahead for people. Where you're absolutely right. I'm not taking anything away from the momentous day, the good things that have happened, but there's a lot of probably bloodshed ahead here.
More than likely, I think the way to look at this personally is that this is the beginning of the end of the regime. The Iranian people and the allies who are going to help them achieve this mustn't lose sight of this. What they do need to do is realise that there are others there who unfortunately still share the same ideology and still want to carry on the work that Khamenei did. But the most important thing to remember is that this is the chance to embolden those who want to uprise about it and do something about it.
The IDF, the Israeli army, launching a new wave of strikes in Iran, particularly in western Iran. This will go on for some time, Andy.
Yeah, one thing I'm really interested in, and this is not to try and sort of dampen down the positivity, because I agree with Phil, you know, overall this is a really significant and positive move. But America's role in all of this, I think, is very interesting. Their history of intervening in countries abroad is pretty bad, pretty disastrous. They tend to fail. Trump has no plan whatsoever for what happens next. He's just said, when we're finished, take over your government. Now, whether or not the US are going to provide financial support or whether they're going to intervene politically to help with the potential uprising, I think that's really, really interesting. And it's not, I'm not comparing it to Iraq or Afghanistan because they're completely different situations. But if you look at those two examples in the region within the last 25 years, they failed miserably on both counts. So I think we just need to strike a note of caution. It's not as though everything is sorted now and Iran can go on to,
Well, you're absolutely right, because Iran has launched more than 25 waves of missiles and drones, 27 US military sites across the Middle East, taking aims at Israel, Bahrain, Qatar, the UAE, Kuwait, Iraq. British and other foreign forces in the region mobilising to defend themselves from the threat. The UK taking a drone down as well. The UK saying it's not involved in offensive operations alongside the US and Israel. John Healey, of course, talking to Sky News a little bit earlier on. And Zach Polanski, for it is he, the leader of the Green Party. His deputy, by the way, can we show this actually? Can we show this on the screen? His deputy, Mothin Ali, who is the deputy leader of the Green Party, the one that's just got a new MP, he was at a pro-regime protest yesterday. Let's just show this on the screen and see this guy, deputy leader of the Green Party in the UK, and he was at a pro-regime protest yesterday. This is absolutely astonishing, yet not astonishing. Mothin Ali was there. And Zach Polanski saying, really concerned to hear the Defence Secretary refuse to rule out the UK's involvement in future strikes in Iran. Iraq lessons must be learned. Further escalation in the Middle East makes us all less safe. Starmer must rule out UK involvement immediately. Phil.
Yeah. Okay, so the first thing is, as Andy rightly said, you cannot compare this to Iraq or Afghanistan. This is different. I'll tell you why it's mainly different is because actually this was more Israeli-led than it was American-led. The Americans were helping the Israelis in trying to take this on because they knew the scale of the task ahead. And although the Israeli army is incredibly powerful, sadly, it is not quite that powerful. However, I would point out one thing, is that sort of when you say about America having a bit of a reputation of not much success in intervention, which you're quite right about, the difference is Israel has huge levels of success. So actually, I am slightly more optimistic about it, but I do completely understand why people would compare it to what's happened in Afghanistan and Iraq. Curiously enough, by the way, I was reading some report, by the way, that suggests that the leader of the Taliban, of course, now actually sort of the one who's at the head of Afghanistan, came out in support of what Israel and America did. I don't know if that is true or not, but that's very curious if that is the case. But as I said, that's unconfirmed. But if that is the case, that's fascinating. But what is particularly interesting is that we still seem to have a situation in the Western world where all of the rejects from the Middle East are still crying out in support of the regime. They don't recognise the significance of this. And their idea of a slightly less safe world is very different to mine.
And by the way, Putin as well, of course, has cried foul here, and I thought it was quite ironic that he said this was a violation of international law.
Yeah, well, he should know all about
I was going to say, he should know.
He should know all about that. We're going to talk a bit more about this and speak to the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Priti Patel, and Johnny-come-lately Phil Dave about where he was last night in just a minute. Stay with us here on Talk.
Breaking news. Israel says it has launched an attack on Iran as explosions are reported in Tehran. The Israeli defense minister has said his country has launched a preemptive attack on the regime, and the Iranian state media have reported explosions in the east and north of Tehran. The defense minister of Israel has also announced a state of emergency in Israel.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your your mobile. And on your side, this is Talk.
Well, 40 days of mourning has been confirmed in Iran. I will not be mourning for 40 milliseconds that Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is dead. The question is what comes next and the struggle that will be there for liberation of the Iranian people. Andy, what do you make as a broad supporter of Labour? Not, I'm going to hold you responsible for every single thing the Labour Party has done, but what do you make of what the Prime Minister and the government has done with this, Andy?
Well, I think they've taken broadly the right approach, which is to say this is a terrible regime, we're in support. Of course, they're not going to join in with these strikes. They don't need to. Actually, as Phil was saying, America is by far and away the most sophisticated, powerful military force in the world. I don't think the UK's help, given the state of our military, is going to make a huge difference.
What about using bases and things like that? And Cyprus, for example, Diego Garcia, that's apparently been ruled out. Should we have allowed that to happen?
It depends. I think if the conflict escalates and becomes more complex, if Iran continues to strike other targets in the region and this becomes more of a, at the moment, this is a bombing campaign with some retaliation. If it becomes all-out war, I'm pretty sure I know which side Keir Starmer and the Labour government is going to be on. It's really important to be clear, whatever you think of Labour, they're not the same as the Greens on this sort of stuff.
They're not the same on the Greens, but what is interesting is the way that still Starmer and his bunch of friends, we'll call them, are determined to hang on to this stupid notion of we're all peace-loving, we're all encompassing, therefore we don't start wars, we don't get involved with anything like this. Because, of course, there's two things. They're scarred by what happened with Tony Blair, and they saw the effect that had on Labour. And the other thing is that they know that, of course, that there's a certain population in this country that has increased quite dramatically over a number of years, and they want to maintain their support. So we all know what they're doing. We know why they're playing it like this. But what's really peculiar, I'd say, is that it's probably what they don't admit to, or they don't are not transparent with, I should say, is the real reason behind this. And that is because they know how diabolical the state of the military is in this country. They know that if we get involved and we get attacked, we couldn't defend ourselves.
Yeah, I agree with that, and that is the result of a decade and a half of underinvestment by the previous government. I know people are bored of hearing that's the case.
A continuing underinvestment in military.
What is frustrating is that an ambition has been set out to get defence spending up dramatically, but nothing more than an ambition, no plan, and that's what's needed.
We're going to be speaking to the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Priti Patel, in just a few minutes' time. Meanwhile, some breaking lines that will happen right throughout the show. We'll keep you absolutely up to date with what's happening here on Talk. 1 person killed, 11 injured at airports in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Iran launching attacks across the Middle East in response to what the US and Israel has done. This is so much wider than simply Iran versus Israel and the US, isn't it, Phil?
Totally and utterly, and this is my point, is that you must remember the Iranian regime hate countries like the UAE, like Bahrain, and all of these who are interested in peace and moving forward and being more forward-thinking.
It was actually one of our, sorry to interrupt you, it was actually one of our callers who mentioned earlier on about the Abraham Accords, which is a big deal as well. I'll come back to the debate desk in a second, but I'm going to speak to the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Priti Patel. Dame Priti Patel, good morning.
Good morning, Peter.
What is your reaction to Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's death and what Britain has been doing in the last 36 hours in reaction to these strikes?
Well, first of all, the Ayatollah was a repressive leader that has brutalised his citizens and has been sponsoring a reign of terror for 37 years around the world, and no one should mourn his loss whatsoever. In terms of Britain's role, well, Britain sat on the fence once again, as it did last year during the 12-day war. And I have to say that when we know of all the threats that Iran has posed to our country, to our military personnel, to our bases around the world, to our nationals and our citizens, I think it's really quite extraordinary that Keir Starmer once again just sits on the fence and has taken no supportive action whatsoever and has been seen to be an unreliable partner of our biggest ally in the world, the United States of America.
What should he do now, especially if this escalates, which it may well do? How can we support the Iranian people?
Well, I think first of all, it's got to show some leadership and show some backbone, basically. The Iranian people have been fighting for and dying for their freedom for so long. And Peter, we just saw in January the brutal murder and repression of up to 30,000 young Iranian citizens just for speaking up for freedom. And I have to say, I think the British government has, really shown how weak it is when it comes to giving voice to them and standing up for them. I find it extraordinary that the British government has not prescribed the IRGC. I've spoken in Parliament many times now and said that my party would support them in bringing forward emergency legislation to take action against the IRGC, because they are a pillar of the Iranian regime that has been there being repressive and threatening our country.
It wasn't a prescribed organisation. You didn't prescribe it as Home Secretary, though, and you could have.
Well, the circumstances have changed now and are very different, Peter. Let me be clear
how is the
about
IRGC
that.
different now to what it was before, Pretty? Come on.
Well, in terms of the actions that have been taken by the IRGC, in terms of the murders in its own country, and by the way, I prescribed Hamas in its entirety, which is an Iranian proxy that has been sponsoring terror and was doing terrible things in our own country and around the world. I also think it's extraordinary that the British Foreign Secretary has not even expelled the representatives of the Iranian regime in our country. This is the time to do it. But you've asked about what the British government should do in the days ahead. I've just outlined two things, but it should effectively be supporting our allies in the region. Yes, in terms of defensive strikes. We've seen what's going on in the Gulf states, in Bahrain, in Dubai, in Kuwait with these strikes. But protecting our military bases, protecting our citizens, protecting British nationals is exactly what the British government should be focused on right now.
There's a lot happening, as you mentioned, in a lot of those other nations. We know there are reports that 9 bodies and at least 32 injured people were brought to hospital after violent clashes with police near the United States Consulate General in Karachi, for example. Pro-Iran protesters taking to the streets there in Lahore, Islamabad as well. I just wonder about worries for British people as well, many of them caught up in these countries and maybe targets for these attacks as well, especially if we get further involved.
Well, I think it's just a fact now that clearly with Iran in particular lashing out and their indiscriminate strikes that are taking place, that British nationals follow every single piece of advice that comes from the Foreign Office, but also from the countries where they are in. And I have heard that certainly in the UAE, people are receiving alerts and up-to-date warnings on their mobile phones. And every British national must follow the advice that they're being given. And in particular, I know the Foreign Office has urged everyone to register through various websites that they are sharing information on, and that they should stay put and stay in their buildings and absolutely make sure that they are following advice.
What do you make of what the Green Party have been saying? Zach Polanski says we've got a defence secretary saying diplomacy is the long runway we need, but won't condemn Donald Trump when he attacks a country and assassinates its leader. That's the law of the jungle. That's an end to international law.
Well, the Green Party would not protect our national security, and just listen to the policies that they have. And quite frankly, those are irresponsible statements when our armed forces, our service personnel, men and women, and our bases are under attack and under threat from the Iranian regime, along with British nationals and British citizens. What I would say is that we absolutely know that the Green Party do not believe in national security or protecting British citizens around the world, and those comments are utterly irresponsible.
I wonder if I could just ask you about two other things, but they are related to what's happening in the Middle East. One is the fallout from the Gorton and Denton by-election, where there was a lot of family voting. That is something that we've seen and has been talked about by independent observers. The Conservatives, of course, lost their deposit. Worst performance in a by-election, I think, ever. I just wonder what you would do to try to stop family voting, to try to instill the values of democracy, one person, one vote, and a secret ballot, especially as we look at the threat from Iran and how Islamists would stop that kind of thing in our country.
Well, I think it's deeply alarming, these reports that we're hearing from the by-election and some of the practices that have taken place. And Peter, you know my party has written to the Electoral Commission. I think it's absolutely right that investigations do take place. We believe in one person, one vote, absolutely. And any attempt to undermine and subvert our democracy needs to be absolutely investigated and looked at. There's no question about that. And that is something that we would absolutely support and encourage.
The Keir Starmer, our Prime Minister, spoke to the President of the United States, Donald Trump, last night. What should his message be?
Keir Starmer's message should absolutely be that we support what has happened now in the region and these strikes in removing the leadership of the Iranian regime, and we must work with our allies to protect British interests, but also our allies in the region. This is a pivotal moment, and clearly President Trump was speaking yesterday about a better future for Iran, for these people that have been fighting for freedom and democracy for so long. It's important that we support them now in their endeavours for a peaceful transition, if that is possible, but importantly for a future of peace, freedom and democracy in Iran.
Just one final question as we look to what may happen in the next few days. And one thing the government would very much like us to forget over the last couple of days is what's happened with Josh Simons, the Cabinet Office Minister, who has resigned because the organisation he used to be the head of, Labour Together, did a smear campaign against a couple of journalists. Freedom of speech in this country, freedom of the press, incredibly important, a Western value that Ayatollah Khamenei hated. Tell us your thoughts on Josh Simons resigning and that inquiry.
Well, I think he's an absolute disgrace, I really do. And quite frankly, he's a member of Parliament who should be standing up for freedom, democracy, free speech. And he has now had to resign from government. And I have to say, he should have been sacked. He should never have been made a minister in light of what we now know. Trying to suppress free speech, trying to, force investigations into journalists. I mean, what kind of practices are those in an open country and in our own country? And this really speaks to what we see now in terms of Keir Starmer's government and the underhand practices that they have been deploying. This is an absolute disgrace. And I have to say, despite the fact that he's resigned from government, there are still so many questions that Keir Starmer, the Labour Party and his party in government should answer about these practices. It is shameful, it is a stain on our country, it's a stain on our politics, and quite frankly, Keir Starmer should be held to account for this.
Sorry, I do want to ask you just one more thing, which is what will the Conservative Party be doing as the opposition to drive through what they want to do on Iran in the next few days? How will they be supporting the Iranian people? What will you be doing as Shadow Foreign Secretary?
Well, I have been so vocal about standing up for and standing by those people that have been fighting for freedom and democracy, the people that have been brutalised. And I'd say this, we stand by them and we support them in their endeavours for freedom and democracy in their country. And they want to know that we are on their side. That's why they've been out there protesting since the beginning of January. We owe it to them to see a good, peaceful transition and a positive future for them. And we, and my party, will absolutely stand with our allies in the region and stand with America to do everything we possibly can to see that happen.
Dame Priti Patel, Shadow Foreign Secretary, thanks for joining us on Talk this morning. Andy, your reaction to what she said there?
I mean, if you want to understand why the Tories are on 2% at the by-election and languishing in the polls, there's your answer. I mean, what a load of absolute nonsense. Disappointing.
Was it?
Yes. Disappointingly partisan. You asked her, what would your message be to the President of the United States? She didn't say anything that Keir Starmer hasn't said. She talks about an unreliable partner. The only unreliable partner in the transatlantic relationship is Donald Trump in the White House. And as for her talk about prescribing, I mean, you nailed her on that, prescribing the RGC. She was Home Secretary for 3 years.
Yeah.
She did nothing, and it's the same as always on every issue with the Tories, which is they had 14 years to do things and they did nothing.
No, but it's symptomatic of the politicians that we find ourselves in this day and age. Unfortunately, they're all mouth and no trousers. It's just as simple as that. It really is what it boils down to.
Let's talk about what you were up to last night, Phil. There's no greater Saturday night than with Phil Dave than heading out to Golders Green for a celebration of Iran. Tell us what
being late this morning. No,
tell us what happened, and we have some footage as well if you're watching. There is the smiling Phil Dave with his V sign last night as well at the extraordinary protest there.
It really was actually completely extraordinary, because actually it wasn't a protest, it was a celebration. That's what was so strange. It was a really impromptu street party, and it was sheer coincidence that I was there. I rarely go to Golders Green, would you believe? And there was a group of friends of mine. We went out for dinner, and we heard all of this commotion. Sort of as we walked out the restaurant, we kept hearing cars hooting and stuff like that, and just sort of, what on earth's going on? Anyway, so we all said farewell and got into the cars, and as I was driving down Golders Green Road, traffic was just diabolical, so I pulled over and I thought, right, I'm going to go and see what the heck's going on here. And just these crowds of people all over the place just gathering. And then I got a message from a friend of mine who lives near Finchley. Another gathering had happened there, but that's because it's quite a large Persian community there. They were all gathering with the true Iranian flag, celebrating and cheering on the street. Absolutely mind-blowing scenes. It really felt very historic.
And tell us about the people who were there as well.
Every single type of person you could possibly imagine, everyone coming together under, well, the irony, under the sun, of course, under the moonlight, but you know what I mean. But every single type of person there, you'd be forgiven for thinking in Golders Green and Finchley Central, those are areas, just people listening outside of London, quite densely populated with Jewish communities, but it was far from it. Yes, of course, there were some Jewish people there, but there were Christian people there, there were even other Muslim people there were Hindus, there was every single type
and
of
many Iranians, I'm sure, as well.
Absolutely. Plenty of Iranian people. In fact, actually, I didn't realise that London had such a large Iranian/Persian community, and clearly they all felt compelled to come out and celebrate with their neighbours, and just the most amazing day in their history, really.
Phil, you're a colleague of mine. You're someone who I know had round his neck a tribute and to the hostages in Israel. This is the number one issue for you is the Middle East, from what we have talked about, I think. Maybe?
Well, let me put it this way. Okay.
Major issue.
Yeah, I was going to say, it is a major issue. I do not lose sight of the fact that sort of as domestic issues go, there are far greater concerns. But international, no doubt about it, the Middle East is definitely
my question is, how did it feel for you to be there, to see that? What have the last 36 hours been for you?
I don't think I've stopped smiling. Truly, I don't, because this is someone who is, as you rightly identify, very entrenched in Middle Eastern politics and understanding the geopolitics of the Middle East as well as I do. This is so unbelievably significant. You know, you're talking about the mastermind, really, behind all of the terror attacks that have affected the Western world and our allies is dead. Can we get our heads around that? You know, that people...
It is absolutely historic. It's a really, really important, significant moment.
And also, might I point out really quickly as well, just because of the significance of this, is actually, it's not just about the mastermind behind it, it's the person who funds it. So a lot of this terror we see on the streets, you know, these pro-Palestinian terrorists at protests, it's funded by Iranian money.
Phil, thank you. Phil, Dave and Andy Williams. Really appreciate you having you on the debate desk, and great to have you on my last Sunday programme as well. Thank you.
Congratulations on your new show.
Oh, thank you. That's very,
we look forward to seeing you on the 7 o'clock slot.
Indeed. Well, the debate desk is something I think we may well import, so I think the two of you may well be on those seats again, just a little bit darker outside perhaps. We're going to talk in just a second to great experts on this, Sir Richard Dalton, the former UK ambassador to Iran, and Alistair Burt, the former Middle East minister, many others including Isabel Oakeshott. Lots to discuss here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, it's just gone 11 o'clock. Thank you to everybody who's contributed to the programme so far. Loads of calls, texts, tweets and voice notes coming in about what's happening in Iran. We will speak to a former ambassador to that country, Sir Richard Dalton, in a moment. We've got the former Middle East Minister, Alistair Burt, one of the best analysts of what's going on in the Middle East. We will talk to him. We'll talk to our international editor, Isabel Oakeshott, who's in Dubai. We'll talk to you as well before the end of the programme. Lots of time for calls, texts, tweets and voice notes. The former interim ambassador from the US to the UK, the defence analyst Colonel Simon Diggins, Khazra Arabi, director of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Research Unit. We'll talk to Yoram Confino in Israel. There are loads of voices that are going to be on this programme finding out what is happening across the Middle East. We'll hear from there, we'll hear from here in the UK as well, and we'll hear from you. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note, less than a minute please if you would. 0344 499 1000. That number for phone calls and for WhatsApp text messages as well. Plenty coming in, and let us know what you think right through until 1 o'clock here on Talk. I should also say this is my final Sunday programme. I'm moving to the weekdays, as you may know, between 7 and 10. So at the very, very tail end of the programme, we're going to have just a few minutes to remind ourselves of some of the couple of fun features that we had previously on the programme. So you might want to stay tuned for that, on the return of an old friend, just for 2 or 3 minutes to lighten the mood. Obviously, it's a very, very serious situation in the Middle East, and a number of people have leaders, of course. We've heard from Starmer, Kemi Badenoch on Twitter saying Britain's Defence Secretary can't tell us if our government supports the strikes on Iran. The government has already lost all support and all credibility. It now can't answer simple questions. We are not being governed, says Kemi Badenoch. Nigel Farage, last week the EU designated Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, says Nigel Farage, as a terrorist organisation. Britain must do the same. Keir Starmer should show some leadership for once and prescribe the IRGC, as I have urged for many years. Let's see how state media in Iran announced the death of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei.
After a lifetime of Hosseini struggle, unceasing and untiring, with a lofty and celestial spirit like the steadfast mountain of the Islamic guardianship, the compassionate father of kindness and resolve, the leader and imam of the Muslims, His Eminence Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Hosseini Khamenei, on the path of upholding the exaltation of the sacred sanctuary of the Islamic Republic of Iran, drank the sweet, pure draught of martyrdom and joined the supreme heavenly kingdom.
I mean, just the absolute nonsense that has been broadcast there about the compassionate father. This is a repressive dictator who killed tens of thousands of people in the last few weeks alone. John Healey is our Defence Secretary here in the UK. He's been speaking to Sky News this morning. This is what he said.
I've got full confidence in our intelligence agencies and our ability to deal with the terrorist threats. When you get a regime like this lashing out in the Middle East indiscriminately and widely, hitting civilian as well as military targets, when you have some of its proxies capable of other actions on their behalf, then of course our force protection in the region is at its highest. Our alert and our vigilance in the UK is also high.
John Healey speaking to Sky News a little bit earlier on in the morning. Joanna in Salisbury saying, hi Cardi P, this new IRGC leader Ahmed Vahadi is supposed to be more hardline than his predecessor. Who appointed him out of the frying pan and into the fire? Shane in Maidstone. Where can we contribute to the flights back to Iran for these protesters who want to go back? And Jason in the Lake District says a very large spotlight needs to shine on the Green Party and the leadership. They're shockingly lacking on morality with the Iranian situation and the need to call it out. Well, a former ambassador to Iran is Sir Richard Dalton, who joins me now. Sir Richard, good morning.
Good morning.
What do you make of what has happened in the last 36 hours?
Well, Iran and the United States have got big decisions to take in the case of Iran, do they launch their major retaliation, or do they heed President Trump's warning that if they do, then yet more violence would be inflicted on them by Israel and the United States? There's also a difficult decision in Iran as to whether they continue to attack the Gulf states who were active in trying to prevent this war from breaking out, and will be saying, well, why are we now being punished by Iran for doing that? I think the reason the Iranians are doing it is that they want to yet again encourage those Gulf states to get on the telephone to President Trump and tell him to call it off before even more destruction and mayhem is sown in the Middle East as a consequence of Trump's decision to go to war this time. So, as always with war, you don't know what is going on in the minds of the protagonists, and it's extremely hard to forecast what's going to happen next.
You talk about destruction and mayhem that has been unleashed by President Trump. He would argue that those strikes were pretty surgical. They've got rid of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Surely that is a good thing.
Yeah, 100 children killed in a school in southern Iran. That's certainly a very precise strike. I mean, war creates collateral damage on all sides, and that's why our country, as well as others who care about law and order, should be calling for a ceasefire and a return to negotiations to resolve the many problems that exist between the international community and Iran.
Do you honestly think a ceasefire would mean that the regime would fall?
No, the regime would survive, but then the regime may survive under this kind of onslaught. They've
done quite a lot of damage in the last 36 hours, surely, and this is the opportunity for so many people in Iran to fell the regime, is it not?
Yes, that's right. But I think there are at least 4 options. But again, it's impossible to predict in such a fast-moving situation.
Talk me through those 4 options, if you want.
One is that the regime survives, bloodied, but determined to carry on with what it regards as its religious and historic mission to rule Iran. The next is that the country breaks up and that there is in effect a civil war, because a lot of people are going to fear for their lives in any new dispensation in Iran, and they may seek to continue resistance and to reinforce parts of that vast country against any new political forces that are emerging. Civil war is an option. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it's a possibility. Another is that the scenario pans out as President Trump intends. The bombing so seriously weakens the Islamic Republic that large section of the security forces throw the towel in and decide to try and find some partners to call forward out of Iranian civil society to negotiate with. Problem with that scenario is that no such parties exist because of the degree of repression and the degree of intense factionalism amongst those who oppose the Islamic Republic in its present form. There are no coherent political forces in the wings ready to take over, but that offers at least some hope of a reasonon't peaceful transition under that scenario.
What about the
final scenario?
Yep.
Is I won't keep you long.
No, take as long as you like.
Is that a group of military leaders in Iran, in conjunction with senior civil institutional leaders, decide to proclaim martial law and get out on the front foot against any potential uprising, and having, they would hope, suppressed any potential uprising, then to proceed to negotiate in a more pragmatic manner and in a more successful manner than Ayatollah Khamenei has been willing to authorize hitherto.
What do you think is the most likely of those 4 scenarios, and what do you think the Americans and Israelis do now?
Well, they should call off this illegal aggression. There's no doubt about that.
Why?
But, well, we've been over this before with you, and I don't want to repeat myself too far, but you can't have a world order in which Putin and Trump are free, as they claim at present to attack anybody they choose on any grounds they choose, with whatever lies and exaggerations.
The Iranians don't care about international law, though, do they?
That is not in the interests of the British people to have a world in which the only rule is the rule that strong countries can make up the rules as they go along.
What did the negotiations actually achieve, Sir Richard, in your view?
Would you repeat that question?
Sure. What did the negotiations achieve, if anything?
Well, going by the verdict of the Omani foreign minister, there had been substantial movement on both sides towards a landing point at which the nuclear controversy could be resolved, and assurance provided for everybody that Iranian policy intentions never to have nuclear weapons would once again be confirmed, perpetuated, and subject to detailed international supervision. Now, that would clearly have been a much better outcome than the war we now have.
I wonder what you think is likely to happen. I mean, you don't want this to continue, and you've made that very clear on a couple of occasions. My instinct, and you're the expert, but my instinct is that Donald Trump will continue with this, and there will be war at least for a few weeks, if not longer. What's your instinct on that?
Yes, I believe that this is an attempt by the United States yet again to assert its claimed right to organize the world as it wishes, using whatever military force it wishes. It follows on Venezuela. It follows on the idea that Trump put out that he was going to take over Cuba in a friendly way. It follows on a history of extremely violent United States involvement in Middle Eastern wars. So I think the instinct in Washington under this government will be to continue and not to call it quits, given that they've put their shirt on a popular revolution in Iran and the destruction of the Islamic Republic. So whether it lasts days or weeks, I think more war is the track we're on at present.
Is it not a better thing, though, that the regime, that there's at least a chance that the regime falls? Because we've seen various uprisings in Iran previously. What we haven't seen is external help for that for some time, for some years, although, of course, there was the bombing in the summer by Israel and the US as well. Surely if the Iranian people can be free, is that a prize not worth going for?
It's certainly a prize that we all earnestly hope for. But if you're analysing policy and the use of military force to support policy, you have to take account of the risks and the likely losses and the likely damage, and also the implication for security in other parts of the world, not just for 85 million Iranians. And that is why many of us think that when you put everything in the pot, what you come out with is not some kind of noble attempt by the Americans to free the Iranian people, but a reckless gamble which may lead to appalling consequences. Maybe I'm wrong, but that was the risk which I believed and still believed the United States should not have run.
Okay, very interesting perspective there. I think, once again, we respectfully disagree. Sir Richard Dalton, who's the former UK ambassador to Iran, thank you for joining me on the programme this morning. Lots of people getting in touch on all of this, and thank you for all your messages this morning. I'm sorry I haven't read out as many of them as I would have liked to. Let me just read out some more. Taff in Dover says, "Morning, Peter. Why do most of our ambassadors or diplomats go native and continually back the country they were sent to and have more concern for that country and not the West?" says Taff. Robbie says, "Sir Richard Dalton should be stripped of his knighthood. My goodness, he makes Kim Philby look like a British patriot." Wow, that's a bit harsh. Does he ever back the civilised Western world where children are not murdered in the name of the Islamic State? He must be exposed for what he is, an Iranian supporter. I don't think he is necessarily. I disagree with him on a lot of points, and I think he could be a lot stronger in his condemnation of what Iran has done. But nonetheless, I appreciate him coming on the programme. Nicola in Norfolk says, "Richard Dalton demonstrates perfectly the weak, woeful attitude of the establishment, which has kept the tyrannical Iranian regime in place for far too long. Waffling on about the law and negotiating is the fig leaf which has been used to hide its weak and spineless leadership," says Nicola. Stephen in London says, "I'm old enough to remember that during the 70s and 80s we used to send electoral observers all over the world to help make sure new democratic elections were fair and not corrupted. Now it looks as if we are in the need of world observers to make sure our elections are fair and corruption-free. How sad is that, says Stephen in London. Bill in Romsey says Starmer lacks backbone. He is not caring about this country. He is just thinking about the Chagos Islands and a big payday for his friends. All the best for your evening slot. Thank you, Bill. Appreciate that. Dan in Kent. The US have always been a bull in a china shop, and the peacekeeping is always left to the British. The difference with this action and the Iraq or Afghanistan war is the peacekeeping won't be left to the British, who geographically were always going to fail. No, this time it will be Israel, which makes complete sense to Cardi P. Location, 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 says Dan. Lots to discuss. We're going to go to Alistair Burt in a minute, the former Middle East minister. He is one of the best analysts of all of this. He's really interesting and knows this stuff backwards. Stay with us here on Talk.
Breaking news. Israel says it has launched an attack on Iran as explosions are reported in Tehran. The Israeli defense minister has said his country has launched a preemptive attack on the regime, and the Iranian state media have reported explosions in the east and north of Tehran. The defense minister of Israel has also announced a state of emergency in Israel.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Iran state media says it's been hit by 60 attacks in 24 hours, leaving 57 people dead. Israel's military says it's been targeting the capital. Smoke is seen being billowing above the city in many, many pictures and on lots of footage that we've seen. The Defence Secretary here in this country says Britain will act in a strictly defensive capacity. Jets in Qatar that are British jets will continue to shoot down Iranian missiles. Iranian missiles landed a few hundred yards from British troops in Bahrain, apparently as well, and he refused to explicitly say Britain supports Israel and the US offensive, but did call Ayatollah Khamenei a source of evil, citing over 20 terror plots against the UK, and we know that that has been questioned by Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage as well. Well, Alistair Burt was the Middle East minister and knows the region backwards. His analysis is some of the first I turn to in all of this. Alistair, good morning and thank you for joining me on this really momentous weekend. An awful lot has happened. What do you make of the last 36 hours?
Thanks for welcoming me onto your show, Peter, very much. I'd take two things out of it. There's an awful lot, but let's look at two things in particular. Firstly, the map of the Middle East is radically different from the morning of October the 7th, 2023. And that is because Hamas has been neutered, Hezbollah has been wrecked, Syria's regime has gone, and Israel has demonstrated that it can defend itself and has sought to make sure it no longer has an enemy in the region and now is tackling Iran. I think this would have been unthinkable a couple of years ago, and it is a measure of the consequences of the horrendous Hamas attack in 2023. The second point I'd pick out is this issue and dilemma over international law. Effectively, it's gone. Now, in the circumstances we're talking about, I would imagine no Iranian who's been repressed for decades will be sorry that international law has not intervened at this stage. And very few of us and your viewers will feel any sympathy for the regime. But then at the same time, we're taking Russia to the UN for its breaches of international law in relation to Ukraine, and we will undoubtedly do so when China moves to take over Taiwan. What protection is there if it is only to be the might that makes the decisions, the force and the might? In this particular case, it suits us. It suits our perception of what Iran is, what the regime is, and what it has done to people. It suits us to say, don't pay attention to international law. We must do what's necessary. That argument will be turned against us in due course. Now, that is the dilemma that I think some of the politicians around Europe and in government are facing. But no one is going to, as many people will have said, shed any tears for the collapse of the regime, if indeed it happens. But we don't know what will happen next, and that would be my third and final point.
And that is a very interesting point about what happens next. I totally get your points in international law. Clearly, Donald Trump simply does what he wants to do and doesn't have that regard for international law necessarily. There's a lot of hand-wringing about that, but I do think the long-term implications are something we do need to think about, and I absolutely appreciate your point on that. When it comes to what happens next, we have seen so many countries like Bahrain, the UAE and so on, many of whom have been signatories to the Abraham Accords, for example, that have been attacked. What is the position of them? And of course, there are many people who are caught up in Dubai, for example. There are many people, UK residents, for example, who are expats out of there. We're actually going to speak to one of them in a few minutes' time. There are so many countries that people thought were relatively safe in the region that have seen attacks in the last 24, 36 hours.
Most of the analysis done before yesterday had always assumed that Iran would strike out at its neighbours if it was under attack. And Iran had said so. It said it would strike at the bases of its enemies, and the United States has bases in Qatar and in Bahrain. But what it has done is it has widened its reprisals and includes, as far as I'm aware, virtually all the Gulf states have been attacked. And what that has done is brought the Gulf states together in condemnation of Iran's action and made them even more implacable opponents. But it was the fallout of what would happen on an attack in Iran, which worried many, and why the effort was made for further negotiations with Iran. Because once the missiles start flying, you don't know what's going to happen. And in a sense, we are one missile away from a catastrophe. Should an Iranian ballistic missile land on a civilian area of Israel, there will be heavy reprisals that will cost many lives. Should a missile have landed in Bahrain on the British part of the facility in Bahrain, then we would have been very much drawn into it, and people would have said, why didn't we do something to stop the attack and stop the attack in the first place if there were going to be those reprisals? So it is the uncertainty of conflict which worries people. Once you've pulled the trigger, then you don't know what's going to happen next. We do not know what the consequences of this action will be in Iran itself, and we don't know how far reprisals will go and where the missiles will land and what casualties there will be. That is why efforts were made to try and prevent a conflict in the first place. But we are now in a new situation.
What about the UK's interests in all of this and how the UK is reacting? We have Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the opposition. Britain's Defence Secretary can't tell us if our government supports the strikes on Iran. The Labour government, she says, has already lost all support and all credibility. It now can't answer simple questions. We are not being governed. What do you make of what she has said there, Alistair?
Well, the government is in more of a dilemma than Kemi is. The government, as I said earlier, on the one hand, supports international law in relation to Ukraine, in relation to Taiwan, in relation to other areas where bullies seek to ignore international law and seek to oppress people. We call it in aid, we try and use it to defend them. This is a situation, of course, in which international law has not worked to defend the people of Iran, and that's the dilemma. And when you said earlier, we're going to have to think about this later on, you're absolutely right. We have to confront this. If the UN worked, we might not be where we are. And the question is, when you're dealing with a rogue state, if you can't rely on international law, how long do you go on where people are oppressed? Now, it's Iran today, but there are many other areas.
Yes.
And people in other countries will say, how do you pick and choose? Why have you chosen Iran?
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but within that, Alistair, how do you evaluate Trump's thinking on this? Because he's gone from being, in the first term certainly, someone who ran a mile from intervention, was seen as something of a peacenik, actually, in many different conflicts. He's tried, at various points, he argues that he's solved 8 different conflicts and all the rest of it. He's set up a board of peace, for example, as well. But here you see him taking, I'm not criticising it, but he's taking unilateral action. He's doing something very different to the first term in the second term. And yet again, my view anyway, is that this country is, and this administration of Starmer, as I imagine would be the case with any administration in Downing Street, is struggling to kind of deal with the asymmetric, non-traditional ways in which he exercises diplomacy.
I'm sure that's correct, and your analysis is correct. Indeed, he was elected on the basis of not going to wars in the Middle East. And there are plenty of tweets out there from 2013 when he said, just watch out, a weakened Obama is going to attack Iran, just you wait and see. Yeah. And there he is doing the same. And in an interview for the New York Times relatively recently, he was asked, what is it that conditions your actions? And he said, nothing, except my own morality. Mm-hmm. In other words, he said very publicly, he will be the only judge of whether he thinks it's right to strike or not. Now, in this particular case, that's the decision. You asked why he might have done it. There are a number of different reasons. One is the ostensible one, the degree of threat posed by Iran. Not immediately. I don't think either Israel or the United States was under imminent threat of attack in the past 24 hours. But long term, it had been, and of course, it might be in the future. But so there is the concern about Iran itself. Other people have suggested it's a diversion from his domestic troubles. He's not popular at home, and an adventure overseas is also relatively popular if you win it. And others suggest that Prime Minister Netanyahu was always very, very determined to take advantage of a weakened Iran. And it would seem that he has persuaded President Trump, even if not all the military commanders, that it's the right thing to do. So we will have to wait and see what motivated President Trump, because you can't always be certain that you're hearing today what you might hear in 6 weeks' time.
What do you make of the reaction in this country? We have Zach Polanski, for example, the leader of the Green Party, saying illegal, unprovoked attacks. Defence Secretary saying diplomacy is the long runway we need, but won't condemn Donald Trump. This is the law of the jungle. You've talked about international law, but we also have Zach Polanski's deputy, Mothan Ali, who has gone to a pro-regime protest as well. We have a lot of people in this country who aren't going to welcome what has happened in Iran, and a lot of Islamists who really don't see this as a good thing. How do we contain that? What is your attitude to and your thought on what happens internally with the internal opposition to this?
Well, I'm pretty straightforward on that. I can't see anybody in the United Kingdom going on a demonstration to support the Iranian regime or to complain about attacks upon the Iranian regime. International law is one thing, but actually standing up for a regime that in recent weeks has murdered tens of thousands.
That's what Mothan Ali did that yesterday. He was there.
I'm aware.
Yeah,
I'm aware of that.
It's astonishing.
It's not a stance that I would support in any way. It's one thing to say, hold on a minute, where is this going to go? What are the consequences of the attack, as I and others are putting? It's quite another to say, let's save the regime and all that. I think that's genuinely wrong, and I wouldn't support any sort of protest like that. So I think for the population in the UK, I would imagine the vast majority of people in the UK will not be sorry to see the regime go, will have been horrified at reports of the regime's activities over many years, will know the threat that it posed to people in the United Kingdom. The question, as always, is what is the best way to deal with that for the long-term safety and security? And as I say, the dilemma I'm posing is that if international law, the United Nations, cannot deal with a situation of repression and threat that Iran posed to many states in the region and to us over the years, then what do you do? And that is what President Trump has confronted. But the downside of the action is we don't know whether there will be a proper regime change in Iran. We don't know whether a more aggressive military and security apparatus will take over. We don't know if this will help the protesters on the streets who still have no arms to take on the security forces. And if there is further substantial loss of life, then people will wonder whether it was the right course of action for President Trump and Israel to take. We're in the land of we don't know at the moment.
Okay, Alistair, always worth listening to Alistair Burt, the former Middle East Minister. Thank you for joining me on the programme. The leader of Hezbollah, the terrorist organisation, has mourned the Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, calling him a martyr. He leaves behind tens of millions of devotees. This nonsense continues to come out. He's described the criminal American and Zionist aggression, the height of criminality. Yeah, they know quite a lot about criminality in Hezbollah, let me tell you. We will fulfil our duty in confronting aggression, confident in Allah's victory, guidance and support. The Lebanese Shia Hezbollah, which is considered one of the most prominent groups sponsored by Iran in the region, organising a public gathering later today in loyalty to Khamenei and in support of Iran. It's very interesting what's happening in lots of other areas as well around the Middle East. Airlines still cancelling and diverting flights in and around the Middle East following the US-Israel attack on Iran and Tehran's retaliatory strikes. All flights from Dubai International and Dubai Al Maktoum are suspended until further notice. It was really interesting just seeing some of the social media posters and what people have said about this. Lots of people go on holiday to Dubai. Lots of people live there from this country, of course. There are lots of people who make a living there as well. Let's just see a little Instagram post from a woman called Denise Curran, who posted this last night.
Debris fallen on the ground.
I am absolutely distraught. We have witnessed it, we've heard them. We're in Dubai right now, we're in JBR in a family holiday, and we went out for something to eat earlier on, and we were told to go home, close our doors and don't be close to windows. I'm just so worried about my children. I'm trying to be so strong for them, but it is so worrying. I heard the missiles or bombs or whatever they are, and I saw them, and we saw them in the sky like shooting stars, only like bombs. Please pray for us.
There was Denise Curran there, who is someone from Northern Ireland who was in Dubai, talking about being very, very scared about what's going on. Please pray for us. She said she's there with her family on holiday. So many expats as well, so many people making a living out there or visiting, not just Dubai, but many and many other parts of the region as well. We'll speak to Colonel Simon Diggins in a second, the defence analyst, and he will give his take on what happens next, I imagine, and also the military aspect of it and the diplomacy too. Stay with us here on Talk. So much to discuss between now and 1 o'clock.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, we're going to speak to Colonel Simon Diggins in a moment, the defence analyst. Lots to get into with him, but let's just remind ourselves of some of what we've heard from the politicians this morning, including the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Peter Cardwell, who I spoke to a little bit earlier, about an hour ago. This is what she said.
The Ayatollah was a repressive leader that has brutalised his citizens and has been sponsoring a reign of terror for 37 years around the world, and no one should mourn his loss whatsoever. In terms of Britain's role, well, Britain sat on the fence once again, as it did last year during the 12-day war. And I have to say that when we know of all the threats that Iran has posed to our country, to our military personnel, to our bases around the world, to our nationals and our citizens, I think it's really quite extraordinary that Keir Starmer once again just sits on the fence and has taken no supportive action whatsoever and has been seen to be an unreliable partner of our biggest ally in the world, the United States of America.
Peter Cardwell, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, speaking to me earlier on there. The Defence Secretary, John Healey, says few will mourn Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. He was killed yesterday by the US and Israeli strikes. Let's see what the Defence Secretary's been saying to Sky News this morning.
I think few people will mourn the Ayatollah's death, not least the family and friends of those thousands of young protesters murdered on the streets of Iranian cities. I mean, Iran and the regime he's led for so long, it's a source of evil, murdering its own citizens and sponsoring and exporting terror, including to countries like Britain.
Lots of people getting in touch about their view on all of this, especially what's happening in the UK as well. Elisa in Chelmsford says, in my opinion, Peter, everyone on our streets who mourned the death of the Ayatollah either needs deported or arrested. They are our enemies. It's absolutely disgusting. The likes of Mothan Ali attended the mourning of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, and he is permitted to represent anyone in our once great country. It's utterly shameful. Looking forward to the light-hearted section at the end of your show, and yes, that is coming up. But there's plenty of serious things to talk about at the moment, particularly Iran. That is our main story, dominating the programme yesterday and today. Colonel Simon Diggins, the defence analyst, my favourite defence analyst, is with us now. Simon, what a 36 hours, my goodness. What is your take on what has happened?
Peter, good morning to you. And absolutely, you say what a 36 hours. I think probably predictable. It looked as though while there were the ongoing diplomatic arrangements going on before, and there appeared to be a conversation, what was required of the Iranian regime was not just to remove all their nuclear weapons, but also to remove their very substantive and very substantial ballistic missile threat. Bear in mind, those ballistic missiles were capable of reaching into Southeast Europe, which brought very much our bases in places like Cyprus within their ambit. So a big change. But I think the Iranian regime, it was too much. In the meantime, they're just playing for time. And eventually, quite rightly, I think President Trump decided enough was enough and called time on them.
You say they're playing for time. Do you think they will fall? Do you think that's inevitable?
I think the current regime will fall. I don't believe that the kind of transition and what happens after is going to be very easy. There is no immediate and obvious leadership in place to take over for them. I think the IRGC will be defeated, and I think the intention of the Americans and the Israelis is continue this campaign. And they've talked about a campaign lasting days, if not weeks, in order to completely write down the IRGC. But it will take. What happens afterwards, I think, will be messy. I fear that is the situation.
Why are you so optimistic that this will happen? We've been speaking to various people today who say there are a range of scenarios, the regime limping on or even recalibrating and being even more brutal and even stronger necessarily. But do you just think the might of the Israeli and American firepower is such that they'll have no option but to go? And to say nothing of the great bravery of the people in Iran, tens of thousands of whom have been murdered, imprisoned, and horrible things happening to them in the last few weeks alone, never mind the many, many decades of this repressive regime.
No, absolutely. I think it'll be lumpy, Peter. I think there'll be areas where regime repression will temporarily succeed. But I think that there's no question, I think, in the minds of the Israelis and the Americans that they really have to go all out for this one now. There's no half measures. There's no way you can talk back to the regime. I suspect there's conversations ongoing. There was just a slight hint yesterday when the announcement came through that for those elements of the regime, particularly I think their conventional armed forces, if If they stayed out of this, then there could be a possible future for them for the future. And I'd be very surprised if people aren't working those links at the moment to see what is the art of the possible. But I think it is going to be lumpy, and I think we are looking for a very uneven regime change.
So there will be, of course, many in Iran who it's within their interests to perhaps stay on. We've seen in Iraq and Afghanistan, for example, some of the military, some of the police and so on that were disbanded actually being reconstituted to some degree. I just wonder how much of the Iranian state you think could actually stay and have credibility and have legitimacy were, for example, the Shah's son to take over or some other civilian regime or even elected democracy to take over.
I think the answer, again, it's going to be very mixed across different sectors. We do know the IRGC and the Iranian regime have penetrated large sectors of the economy and industry. The IRGC has got its own industries and raised its own money, so that will be an issue. I think what we need to be slightly careful is learn perhaps the lessons from Iraq, where there was such a widespread removal of all members of the regime that many parts of the regime completely collapsed, even bits you might regard as relatively innocent, whether it be education, fuel, water, the kind of basic infrastructure. So I think care will need to be taken as to what's going on. I think the longer term future in terms of removing those individuals will have to be for the Iranian people, a bit like, and I will use a comparison, a bit like the denazification program in Germany after the Second World War. And that, for goodness sake, was uneven enough and caused controversy. But I think that's kind of what will have to happen. But in the meantime, we've still got this ongoing fighting, ongoing exchange of missiles and everything that goes with that. And I think that's going to go for a while. And then we'll be looking at, as I say, an uneven and rather lumpy transition to whatever the future of Iran is.
Just let you know, the latest, that is that an oil tanker has been struck off the coast of Oman, injuring 4 people. The Maritime Security Centre in Oman says an oil tanker named Skylight, flagged to the Palau, was attacked around 5 miles from the port of Kasab in the north of the country. 4 of the crew members were injured, all safely evacuated. And we're going to see a lot more of this happening. We know that there are attacks again in Western Iran, for example. This could be weeks, could be months. What's your sort of thought on that, Simon? It's hard to predict these things, of course, but clearly the Americans and the Israelis have prepared well for this. We know the Iranians were prepared as well, because we saw what they did yesterday in very, very short order. There's a lot of firepower, isn't there?
There's a huge amount of firepower, and as you rightly say, there's been a significant amount of preparation. People have been tracing the number of logistics aircraft flying in and out, and it's a significant number. We're talking about hundreds of logistic aircraft movements in and out of the theatre. So the Americans and Israelis are well prepared, not only offensively, but also, and of course, they're expecting a reaction from the Iranians defensively as well. If I might just very quickly comment on the tanker strike.
Of course.
Again, not unexpected. One of the things that the Iranian regime threatened was to close the Straits of Hormuz, and indeed they have practiced that. They have these fast speedboats with extraordinary speeds, up to 130 miles an hour, 116 knots, and they use swarm tactics, mines, and everything that goes with it. And again, one of the things that President Trump said was going to happen, he said he's going to destroy the Iranian Navy. I think what he really meant was destroy the IRGC's bit of the Navy, who have got all these tactics. But I think that in terms of the target sets. They'll be switching the target sets now to the Iranian Navy to make sure, and the IRGC bit of it, in order to ensure that the Straits of Hormuz can be kept open, a vital artery for the world.
I just want to play a little bit of what the Prime Minister has been saying over the last 24 hours. Keir Starmer talking about the UK playing no role in the Iran strikes. This is what the Prime Minister has been saying. Let's take a look.
The United Kingdom played no role in these strikes, but we have long been clear. The regime in Iran is utterly abhorrent. They have murdered thousands of their own people, brutally crushed dissent, and sought to destabilise the region. Even in the United Kingdom, the Iranian regime poses a direct threat to dissidents and to the Jewish community. Over the last year alone, they have backed more than 20 potentially lethal attacks on UK soil. So it is clear they must never be allowed to develop a nuclear weapon. That remains the primary aim of the United Kingdom and our allies. including the US.
Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, speaking yesterday. Simon, what do you make of the UK's role in this and what the Prime Minister was saying there, or lack of role, more accurately?
No, absolutely. I thought he looked extremely uncomfortable just in terms of body language, very, very stiff and very uncomfortable what he's saying. The fact that the UK has played no role, I think, frankly, is disgraceful and shameful. You cannot then have the follow-on words he talked about Iran not being allowed to have nuclear weapons and recognising the harm and horror that Iran has visited on the world, including in Britain, and including being responsible for the deaths of the majority of British soldiers after 2004 in that particular war, and then sit back and do nothing. We know that the Iranians were pushing for a nuclear weapons. Estimates were a matter of weeks away. We know that a substantive amount of their enriched uranium survived the attacks last June, and they were pushing since last October on the direction of the Ayatollah to go for militarised nuclear weapons. In all of those circumstances, to step back and say, oh, we had no role, or that international law does not permit it, it's just complete nonsense. If international law does not permit you to take down a regime that murders its own citizens, that hangs rape victims, that creates terror across the Middle East, that has plots to destabilise our country, then international law has no purpose and is not fit for purpose. And for him and Herma and all the rest of the hoods who stood back on the side, all I can say is shame on you, shame on you.
Simon, thank you. Powerful and brilliant analysis, as always, from Colonel Simon Diggins, the military analyst and obviously former senior officer in our army as well. So much to discuss. Paul in Fife says, good morning, Peter. It's worth remembering J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States, said only last year the United Kingdom is turning into an Islamic state with nuclear weapons. With Starmer now refusing America to the use of our air bases, it will further endorse these comments. How much longer will President Trump remain silent about Starmer and this Labour government? Yes, he has ignored Starmer and treats him with irrelevance, but I want Trump to go further and call him and his government out. We need Trump to remove our very own dictator, Keir Starmer, says Paul in Fife. Dan in Kent says, morning, Peter, and God bless America. Netanyahu is the modern-day Churchill, and this is the beginning of Iran regaining their democracy given away by a lefty useful-aided government in '79, something the UK should be extremely concerned about looking at some of our political parties. And Michael in Islington says, these people have to stop now. The delusional scumbags are dangerous evil if they're supporting this regime. And Angela says, good job, Starmer was kept out of the loop. He'd been singing like a canary, says Angela. So much more to discuss. We'll take your calls, text, tweets and voice notes next here on Talk.
Breaking news. Israel says it has launched an attack on Iran as explosions are reported in Tehran. The Israeli defense minister has said his country has launched a preemptive attack on the regime, and the Iranian state media have reported explosions in the east and north of Tehran. The defense minister of Israel has also announced a state of emergency in Israel.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Couple more updates for you. The UK Foreign Office warning British citizens against all but essential travel to several Gulf states. The UK Foreign Office says don't go to Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar and the UAE unless it is essential. If you're a British national in those countries, you should shelter in place and register your presence. Nat in Tel Aviv has been in touch as well and said, I've already risked my life for a shower today. I only got out of the shelter for a quick breather. And then you have that clown Sir Richard on a little bit earlier on, Sir Richard Dalton, the former UK ambassador to Iran, who Nat certainly disagrees with. The Cyprus government has denied any missiles were launched towards it. In relation to statements and publications referring to the launch of missiles in the direction of Cyprus, it is clarified that this is not the case and there's no indication that there was a threat to the country. The competent authorities are closely monitoring the situation. Earlier we reported the UK defence sources saying 2 Iranian missiles were fired towards Cyprus where there are UK military bases. That is apparently not true. It's hard to know, and of course they say the first casualty of war is truth. We'll speak to a couple of callers now. Khaled is in Leicester. Khaled, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, Peter. The thing is, I think this is double standards hypocrisy. The thing is, look, either we uphold international law or we don't. The point is, you know, on the one side we say we want to defend the innocents, but at the same time we want to kill them as well. So why bomb a school in the first place?
Do you think Ayatollah Ali Khamenei upheld international law?
I don't agree with Iran and their policies and their actions at all. My point is, when Israel and America have massacred innocents in Gaza, right? Why is that upheld? Why are we complicit in their actions? The problem we have is that, you know, on the one side,
what happened in Gaza was 70,000 people were killed in war, and 50,000 of them, by Hamas's own figures, were their own terrorists, and those terrorists have been given pensions, so we know that, and they've agreed a figure of 70,000 with Israel. So I don't want 20,000 people to die at all. I certainly don't want that to happen. But if the 7th of October hadn't happened, that war wouldn't have been launched. So that's Hamas's problem, is it not?
Are you, Peter? Let's not go back, you know, in history again. But you know for a fact that Gazans have been massacred even before Hamas were around. You know, you know that.
Yeah, you haven't said anything about Israelis being massacred, and you haven't said anything about Iranians being horrendously repressed by their regime.
Of course, I told you I don't agree with Iran. I bore that country. You know, their regime, the killing of innocents. Obviously, no matter who does it. My point is, look, we have to have consistency. That if it's a victim, we should be supporting that victim. And if there's oppressor, we should be condemning the.
So, do you think it's a good thing? So, I mean, if you're talking about helping victims, surely those tens of thousands of people who were murdered by the regime in Iran are victims, therefore helping them is a logical extension of your argument by what Israel and what the US have done in the last 24, 48 hours.
That is not helping them, Peter.
Sorry, hold on.
No.
Hold on. You're honestly saying that killing Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is not helping the people of Iran?
Not a chance. Who's going to come? Who's going to take his place? Maybe somebody even more.
Well, they want to stage a revolution. They want to make sure that they have some form of democracy, some form of a regime that doesn't want to murder and oppress them. That's what they're campaigning for. That's what they've been on the streets about. That's what they've been risking their lives for. Are you telling me all of those people are wrong?
Are you telling me that America and Israel, after killing thousands of innocent people in Gaza and also continuously, even after the ceasefire, continuous killing innocents, are you telling me suddenly that they've suddenly developed a conscience now? Or they realize that, there are innocent people in the world that we should help. Suddenly, from becoming murderers and killing innocents, suddenly now they've developed a conscience. You must be mad. You know, I don't believe these evil people. Even yesterday on Al Jazeera... Is
it not just your... I mean, we've talked many times, Khaled. Is it not simply your view that Israel can never do anything right? So even when it is liberating people in Iran, you still think that's wrong, even though you disagree with the Iranians. Can you not see the echo chamber that you're part of here, Khaled?
It's not an echo chamber, Peter. The point is very simple. If a murderer has killed people and suddenly he beats up somebody who you don't like, are you going to say he's not a murderer anymore? He's still a murderer. A murderer's murder. He should be locked up in the first place. He shouldn't be allowed to do anything else, right? Therefore, I don't believe these people in power. They are obnoxious, evil, terrorist-minded. And the thing is, even yesterday on Al Jazeera, one of the Israeli spokesperson, he came on and he stated, this is not my words, you can look it up. Yesterday, Al Jazeera, he was interviewed. He stated the people in position, they are stating that we are preparing for our Messiah. And the Messiah is not a Messiah. We've read about all this in the Quran. It's in the Quran about it's not a Messiah, it's an Antichrist. And
that's where I think we need to end the conversation. Khaled, listen, thank you for your call. Mark is in Lincolnshire and has some thoughts. Mark, go ahead.
Hi there, Peter.
Hi there.
Hi there. Khalid. Yeah, I'll play along with Khalid a little bit here. I'll play.
You don't have to.
Well, I'll play devil's advocate for a second. I agree with the Iranian thing. You know, he needed to go. I've said that for a long time, Peter. The Ayatollah, the regime, you know, it's killed so many people in Iran. So they needed to go. However, I'll play devil's advocate in one sense. I will say, I don't necessarily know how I feel about just having literally Israel as the only military superpower in the entire region now, if that makes sense. Now, what I'm saying is,
I mean, I'm very happy with Israel, Mark. I'm very happy with Israel being the only superpower in the region because the other superpower was Iran, and they were developing nuclear weapons.
Yeah, but that enables them to be able to do whatever the hell they like in that region, doesn't it? They can literally push around anybody they like in that region.
Iran has bombed more countries in the last 24 hours than Israel has for the last 50 years.
I didn't say that Iran was a good counter.
I'm not saying you have. I'm just saying that Israel has a clear opponent and a clear danger from Iran, and that's why they've targeted them. And they've worked with the Abraham Accords, for example, to try to make friends with other regional players because they want stability.
Yes, and that is all well and good. However, the reality is, Peter, and you must realise this yourself anyway, there are, you know, let's just say, not good actors within Israel as well, within the politics of Israel. You know, that is certainly true. You know, yes, Israel, by and large, it's a good actor in the sense of the Middle East. They want a bit more peace in the region. They want to live by their neighbours. I've always supported that. You know that, Peter. However, there are people within the Israeli government, there are people within the politics over there that don't necessarily want that. That do necessarily want a very hard line, shall we say.
And listen, I agree with that. And that's, you know, Israel is a democracy, unlike many of the other countries in the region. And certainly that is a danger. And that's something we'll continue to look at and report on here on Talk. We're going to talk in a second. Thank you, Mark, for your call. Philip T. Rieker, former interim US ambassador to the UK, is coming on, as is Khazra Arabi, who is a really interesting voice on Iran. Lots more voices coming up between now and 1 o'clock, so stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good afternoon. This is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you for your company. Huge changes in the Middle East. Iran has been attacked, as we know. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is dead. Their supreme leader, a repressive, horrible, evil dictator. Reaction here in the UK, reaction around the world. That's what we're going to bring you in the next hour in this programme, and reaction from you as well. I want you to give me a shout on 0344 499 1000. We'll speak to the former interim US ambassador to the UK. We'll speak to someone who knows Iran very, very well, Kazra Arabi, and we'll speak to you and other guests too. Lots to discuss, and as it is my final Sunday show, we'll be having a little bit of fun at the end of the programme with Tech Up Dave, who will be back in studio just for a few minutes, just to bring back a couple of those lovely features that have made the show such a success over the last 4.5 years. So much to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 7222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. Send me a WhatsApp voice note, less than a minute, please. Send me a WhatsApp voice message, as I say, or a WhatsApp text message, or you can give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss between now and 1 here on Talk. Well, the death of the Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was confirmed on Iranian state TV yesterday, which is anchor had a sort of hysterical reaction of crying, calling him ludicrous things like a comforting father. He was none of those things. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was a repressive and brutal dictator. But I will show you, because it's a big historical event, what happened on Iranian state TV announcing the death of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the Supreme Leader of Iran.
After a lifetime of Hosseini struggle, unceasing and untiring, with a lofty and celestial spirit like the steadfast mountain of the Islamic guardianship, the compassionate father of kindness and resolve, the leader and imam of the Muslims, His Eminence Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Hosseini Khamenei, on the path of upholding the exaltation of the sacred sanctuary of the Islamic Republic of Iran, drank the sweet, pure draught of martyrdom and joined the supreme heavenly kingdom.
Well, after all that nonsense, let's get some sense. We'll talk to Philip T. Rieker in just a second, but I just want to play you the reaction that has been happening in the UK, including from our own Defence Secretary, John Healey. This is what he told Sky News this morning.
I think few people will mourn the Ayatollah's death, not least the family and friends of those thousands of young protesters murdered on the streets of Iranian cities. I mean, Iran and the regime he's led for so long, it's a source of evil, murdering its own citizens and sponsoring and exporting terror, including to countries like Britain.
John Healey there speaking to Sky News, and I spoke to Priti Patel, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, a bit earlier on this morning. This is what she said.
The Ayatollah was a repressive leader that has brutalised his citizens and has been sponsoring a reign of terror for 37 years around the world, and no one should mourn his loss whatsoever. In terms of Britain's role, well, Britain sat on the fence once again, as it did last year during the 12-day war. And I have to say that when we know of all the threats that Iran has posed to our country, to our military personnel, to our bases around the world, to our nationals and our citizens, I think it's really quite extraordinary that Keir Starmer once again just sits on the fence and has taken no supportive action whatsoever, and has been seen to be an unreliable partner of our biggest ally in the world, the United States of America.
Well, speaking of the United States of America, their former interim ambassador to us here in the UK is Philip T. Rieker, who is with us. Philip, you're very welcome to the programme, and thank you for joining me. I wonder what on earth your take is on the last 36 hours are, especially as it was your president, of course, Donald Trump, who was the person behind all of this change in Iran. Hopefully the regime will fall, and of course the death of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei that very few will mourn. What do you think of this, Philip?
Well, I certainly agree with you. Very few will mourn the death of someone who was truly, I think, an odious person. There may be some who are tied to the regime. You saw the emotional outbreak from the state television correspondent that you played earlier. But I think within Iran, there'll be plenty who will welcome this change. And of course, around the world, this has been a regime and an individual who have caused great problems, great stress. The question now will be, where do we go from here? There was very little said in the lead up to this, frankly. President Trump announced this in a recorded message put on social media just before the strikes began with Israel that took that move. Of course, there had been talks going on underway. In this case, diplomacy clearly failed to find a way through. We had the 12-day war that Priti Patel mentioned last year that was supposed to have obliterated Iran's nuclear capability. That was one reason that was talked about, but also I think we see the real goal here was regime change.
Mm. And do you think that regime change will actually be achieved? It's very hard to know. It's a very volatile situation. And given how Iran has responded, is that response what you would have expected?
Yes, I think we could see Iran preparing to respond. They respond much more vigorously than they did to the 12-day war, of course, with attacks against countries in the Gulf region, civilian targets and others. We'll have to see what their extended network capabilities may be able to do around the world. They were long great state sponsors of terrorism under the Khamenei regime. Now I think the question will be what comes next in a country of over 90 million people. I mean, this is a country much larger than Iraq, both in population and in size and area, a more complicated country. And it's unclear what the plan is if the regime completely falls, what will come after.
Yes, and there are so many people, including some Iranians I was actually speaking to last night, just happened to be at a party actually just near the US Embassy, and there are a number of Iranians there, many on the streets here in this country, who have been incredibly happy that Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has gone and they want to return to Iran. But I just wonder, given what the United States have done and the lack of engagement by the UK, did that surprise you in any way? That the UK appears to have been perhaps consulted beforehand. They withdrew some of their diplomats and others before this happened. But Keir Starmer confirming that there's been no proactive role, a defensive role, yes, but no proactive role for the UK.
No, I think that's probably what we would have expected, along with some other allies, France and Germany. This was an attack by the United States and Israel. This is President Trump going a unilateral way. This is something he's demonstrated, whether it was Venezuela. I think we should keep a very close eye on Cuba. Mm-hmm. I'd suggest that's coming down the pike.
And why do you, sorry to interrupt you, Philip, but why do you think that Donald Trump has taken these kind of actions? Because Trump 1.0 in his last administration between 16 and 20 really was not someone who intervened or wanted to intervene in foreign conflicts, whereas now he seems to be a changed man.
Well, it's interesting, Peter, because in his campaign, he campaigned as a peace president, no more engagements in the Middle East, no more forever wars. We don't know where this Iran conflict will go. But this is causing some consternation even within the MAGA movement here in the United States. Of course, others concerned that Congress hasn't been consulted, a further breakdown of the balance of powers. It's a balance of power and control in our country, rule of law. A lot of questions being asked right now, and frankly, very little coming out of it. I was a spokesman at the State Department in the lead up to the Iraq War, which was, of course, also extremely controversial. It remains controversial in Britain and other countries, as it does here. This is a different approach, and it certainly is breaking with the idea of President Trump looking for the Nobel Peace Prize. Instead, we've seen a number of major military interventions.
So why do you think he's doing this? Because if it's not for electoral reasons, and we know, of course, that the midterm elections are coming up in a few months' time, or is it for his legacy? It's really interesting. I saw an interesting post on Twitter that someone was there was a sort of a picture of around the time of Iraq, actually, where you had Donald Rumsfeld, George W. Bush, and Condoleezza Rice, and all those who were around at that time, Colin Powell, and so on. And someone had put the caption saying, none of them at that time would think the guy from The Apprentice would be the guy who was going to actually finally bomb Iran, because this has been talked about for such a long time. I remember John McCain talking about it in 2008. You know, this has been in prospect for such a long time.
I think this is a legacy phase of President Trump's presidency, this second term. But it's also talked about here, is this a distraction? There's a lot going on with the Epstein files. You certainly know that in the UK. A lot of questions being asked. The Clintons dragged in to testify on that, whereas some of those whose names appear, frankly, most often in the Epstein files and are in government now have not been part of that. So that is a line of speculation here, distraction, change. But what we see now is a decision that was taken, obviously in line with Israel, Bibi Netanyahu having visited not long ago. We'll have to see where this goes. The loss of Khamenei, the loss of the regime in Iran can, I think, be welcomed in many quarters, but what comes next will remain the real question. And the group you mentioned in the lead up to the Iraq war that led us to what was supposed to be mission accomplished after just a couple of weeks. We'll have to see if we end up in the same situation here. Iraq went on for well over a decade, Afghanistan, of course, for much longer. And this is something that President Trump had always campaigned against.
So having that knowledge and experience that you had back at that time when you were at the State Department, seeing that happening, what advice would you give the Trump administration right now, especially if there happens to be regime change, and I hope there is? What should they do in order to not repeat the mistakes that America has made in the past when it comes to rebuilding countries?
I think we've got to be very clear that what our goals are, what our limits are in terms of spending, in terms of engagement, and not think that we can reconstruct a country, that we can dictate or determine how things are going to go. We haven't had a lot of contact with Iran for decades at this point. There are Iranians in exile. You've seen Reza Pahlavi and others. But who actually can emerge to take this large and regionally extremely important country to a new future is going to be a big question. And will the United States be engaged at a diplomatic level? We have no USAID anymore. We have a very limited State Department in many ways. So as we've seen with the lead up to this, it's much different than what we've had traditionally in the United States. What will be the tradition now going forward and how we deal with this remains a big question to be watched. And I think you'll be watching in the UK just as many here in the US are watching, and of course across the region and ultimately in Iran.
We certainly will, and Philip, no doubt we will call on your expertise at some stage soon. Thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate it. That's Philip T. Rieker there, former interim US ambassador to the UK. Lots of people getting in touch, including Betty, who says Tehran used to be one of the best party cities in the world. Beirut, the Monaco of the East. There's trillions in oil and minerals and human talent in the region. They all love to spend and buy shiny things. Trump wants his peace prize, but to be under no doubt he sees the long-term benefit to the west of the Middle East being like Dubai or Bahrain. The IRGC has already fled to the UK. It's the only safe haven they have had left, bad Russia and North Korea and China. Another person says, very clear that everything Starmer and Labour has done since month 3, they've realised they were finished, is to get them cushy jobs in the UN or the EU, NGOs, when they get booted out, better in a country of non-extradition, as the entire Labour Party needs rounding up and imprisoned, in that person's view. Another person says, good morning, Peter. Totally dark days in the history of the UK, where our traitorous government has refused to assist America in its courageous effort with the Israelis to get rid of the Iranian regime. Lorraine says, I'm utterly disgusted with our excuse of a Prime Minister who is not fit to govern, in Lorraine's opinion. Starmer is a traitor. He has shamefully been on the side of the terror behind the curtain of his international law. Never forget he emboldened Hamas by recognising a state of Palestine, and yesterday he stooped to the gutless lows of abandoning our allies, Britain under Starmer and Labour, and all those screaming against Trump, including Emily Thornberry, are no longer relevant but also far more at risk, says Lorraine. And Dawn says, can you believe that protesters can actually demonstrate their support for Iran on our streets? I'm afraid this is a grim harbinger of things to come in the UK unless we stop it. And yes, Mothan Ali, who is the deputy leader of the Green Party, was on the streets of this country in support of their regime. He is the deputy leader of the Green Party. They've just won another MP in Gorton and Denton. Ian's in London and has some thoughts on this. Ian, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Good afternoon, Peter.
Hi there.
What I'd like to know is, when is the West going to stop bombing Muslim countries on behalf of Israel? There's at least 6. And before we talk about democracy in Iran, there was a democratic leader called Mohammad Mossadegh, who was ousted by the Americans and Britain to steal Iran's oil, and the Shah, who was an autocrat, was put in, and he was a man who just looted the country for his personal wealth. That's what happened in '79 when we had the Islamic Republic took over.
Okay,
Ian. We bombed Egypt in 1956 to steal the Suez Canal.
Okay.
We bombed Afghanistan, Iraq,
Okay.
Libya. And how has it all well turned out? Has it turned out well?
Do you not think that getting rid of the Ayatollah and a potential takeover of Iran by its people is not something we should welcome and attempt to facilitate, Ian?
I heard the same thing said about Libya. I heard the same thing said about Iraq. I heard the same thing about Afghanistan. Well, we put in the Islamists there. The Soviets tried to get rid of them.
We're certainly not going to put them in Iran.
Right? Oh, yes, you did. You did put them in Iran.
No, but we're certainly not going to...
Mohammed Mossadegh.
But yes,
Mohammed Mossadegh was
Ian,
the Democratic leader in '53.
Ian, if you're not going to listen to me, we can't have a conversation.
All right, carry on, Peter.
Okay, what I was going to say is, we're not going to put in Islamists now. We realise, maybe too late, that the threat from Islamism is a massive threat to the West. It's a threat to the UK. It's a threat to the United States. Not having Islamists in Iran is a good thing.
Well, I think not having Islamists in Syria is a good thing. Not having Islamists in Afghanistan is a good thing.
Okay. Ian, listen, thank you for your thoughts on that. We'll have more calls, texts and tweets before the end of the programme. We're also going to be speaking to Isabel Oakeshott live from Dubai in just a second. Stay with us.
Breaking news. Israel says it has launched an attack on Iran as explosions are reported in Tehran. The Israeli defense minister has said his country has launched a preemptive attack on the regime, and the Iranian state media have reported explosions in the east and north of Tehran. The defense minister of Israel has also announced a state of emergency in Israel.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Isabel Oakeshott is our international editor. She's in Dubai. Isabel, what can you tell us about what is happening there? Because we know and indeed have heard from families who are there on holiday. There's so many people who've made a life out there. And of course, the bombs are falling there too, as well as right across many countries in the Middle East.
Well,
Well, let me just give a little bit of perspective. It's a strange atmosphere because I think it would be ridiculous to say that it wasn't quite frightening, particularly during the night, and particularly when we all received emergency messages on our mobile phones to take shelter. This is truly extraordinary for a place like Dubai, which has built its whole ethos on being the place in the Middle East where this does not happen.
Yes.
So there was an absolute sense of shock in the first few hours, and particularly after the iconic Fairmont Hotel on the Palm was affected, and some disbelief that the notion that this could possibly be deliberate. After all, the UAE is not enemies with Iran. I mean, the relations are certainly not warm, but they're not openly hostile as they would be between the UK and Iran, for example. I mean, the two countries continue to do some business. If I go to the supermarket here, I will find plenty of very nice Iranian produce, actually. So the two countries are hardly at loggerheads, and the UAE is as successful as it is purely, precisely because of its diplomatic pragmatism. So nobody really could believe that this was deliberate. And yet here we are, evidently under attack. And mercifully, the UAE's defence systems at this point are working very well indeed. And I think that shock has given way, certainly amongst those who are permanent residents here and have chosen to make this where they live. It's given way to a real sense of defiance. May well be that tourists, and I can't blame them, are a bit freaked out at this point. But what I'm noticing now amongst everyone I know here is a complete trust in the government here to look after us. And if that sounds strange to a UK culture, I get that. But here, people have chosen to live here because they feel the place is incredibly well run and managed. And therefore, trusting the authorities is something that we're used to here. We see their competence in so many other regards. Now, that doesn't mean that anyone is complacent, and it is disconcerting hearing the boom and thud of intercepts and of missiles. I'm not going to pretend otherwise, but I'm just trying to describe the shift in atmosphere. I do recognise it will be different for people who've landed here sort of accidentally. Maybe they were transiting. It must have been very frightening when the airport was hit. But I think just to keep it in perspective, there have only been, I think, 3 or 4 very minor injuries, a minor bit of property damage at this stage. So I don't think we feel under bombardment as such. Touch wood, let's hope it's never going to come to that.
Although we've had, of course, the Foreign Office here in the UK advising against travel to various parts of the Middle East as well, how much of a worry is there that this will continue? Clearly, the Americans who are pummeling the west of Iran at the moment will continue in this campaign, and if the Iranians take action against various places, there are so many that have been ruled out by the Foreign Office. The travel advice, British nationals, Bahrain, Israel, Kuwait, Palestine, Qatar and the UAE can register their presence to receive direct updates, and it's been advised that people follow travel advice and the advice of local authorities, of course.
I think that there's a sense that nowhere's particularly safe.
Yeah.
Certainly wealthier foreigners, wealthier expats, non-Emiratis, and wealthier all nationalities, I would say, were looking at, perfectly sensibly, looking at what are the contingency plans to get out of Dubai or to get to another emirate, perhaps. And remember, the UAE is made up of 7 emirates, and not all of them are as famous or as juicy a target as Dubai seems to be for this crazy dying regime. And realistically, it's becoming more difficult now. A lot of people did leave by road to Oman in the middle of the night, and that was quite possible. I know people that decided to get out via that route, but most people haven't done that. Mm-hmm. There are also WhatsApp groups full of people talking about sharing the cost of private chartering planes. I mean, how very Dubai is that?
Well, indeed. If only I had that sort of dilemma. Isabel, I just wonder, if you could get a quick word on your reaction to what's happening here in the UK as well. Many Iranians out on the streets with Israelis celebrating this, of course, but we have seen the deputy leader of the Green Party, Mohsen Ali, who's been at a pro-regime rally. He's been pictured there. Your reaction to that, Isabel?
I mean, I'm so sickened by that. I cannot tell you how nauseous that makes me feel. Do these absolute idiots on the hard left not understand the nature of that regime? You know, I talked about this earlier today on Talk. Do they not understand the sheer horror of living under those mad mullahs, particularly for women? Did they not see any of the disgusting evidence of the summary execution and hanging of beautiful young people whose only crime was to go out on the streets and protest for basic freedoms? Don't they understand what Iran could be if it wasn't under this horrific tyranny? These people on the hard left in the UK allow their ideology to blind them to the slightest bit of basic research as to what it is they are talking about. And it is truly disgraceful for a party that is currently being looked at carefully following its victory in that by-election recently to be projecting that kind of message. And it's not just the Greens, by the way. There's an awful lot of hard lefty Labour at this point bleating about international norms and international law and how this assault on the Iranian regime is unlawful. Well, I don't know what's lawful about much that the Iranian regime does.
Or what the Iranian regime's particular regard for international law was. Quite the opposite. Listen, thank you very much, Isabel, as always. Isabel Oakeshott there, Talks International editor. I know you've been very busy and will continue to be in the days to come. We're going to talk in just a second to Kasra Arabi. You're definitely going to want to hear what he says. He is director of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Research at United Against a Nuclear Iran. We'll also talk in a few minutes' time to a spokeswoman for the campaign to free political prisoners in Iran. Loads to come up between now and 1, and we'll be speaking to Tech Off Dave too. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Stephen, who's messaged me to say, hi Peter, great show. Starmer is a weak Prime Minister. He should be ashamed in not supporting America in this attack. Starmer didn't do it because he didn't want to lose the Muslim vote. Shame on Starmer. Hannah says, regardless of what comes in the coming days, this had to happen. Strength is power, and by this token, I am appalled at our current weak government. Just like the left, Starmer and his ilk just can't bring themselves to condemn the Iranian regime and support our best and biggest and most decent allies. Iran has to be stopped. David in Lancashire, on international law, surely it should be restricted to defending democratic rights, not propping up despotic, murderous regimes. Otherwise, it's a useless concept. In my opinion, this is a just war. I'll enjoy listening to you in the evenings from now on. Best wishes, says David in Lancashire. Thank you, David. And yes, it is my last Sunday show. I'm going to be starting a new show tomorrow, Monday to Friday, 7 till 10. And thanks to everybody. We'll talk a little bit more to Tech Up Dave a little bit later on. But I want to speak about Iran now to Kasra Arabi, who's director of Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Research at an organisation called United Against a Nuclear Iran. Kasra, you must be delighted, but I'm sure cautious about what comes next. Give us your take on what has happened in the last 36 hours.
Thank you for having me, Peter. Look, let's take a moment to step back and celebrate what has just happened. We have witnessed the elimination of one of the most brutal, most evil dictators, totalitarian dictators to have ruled Iran, to have ruled across the world, perhaps in history. This was an individual who had the blood of hundreds of thousands of Iranians on his hand, an individual who plotted the October 7th terrorist attacks against Israel, an individual with British blood on his hands, with American blood on his hands. Let's not forget, he was ordering terrorist attacks on our soil in the United Kingdom. More than 20 terror plots foiled by MI5 linked to the regime in Iran. So we need to take a moment, I think, to celebrate his elimination. The world is a safer place without the tyrannical dictator Ayatollah Ali Khamenei.
Absolutely agree with you. We know that quickly there have been others who are jostling for position in Iran. How confident are you that those incredibly brave people, and maybe you'll talk a little bit about those people who have been, I mean, they've been told over and over again, they have propaganda, they have repression, they have people who are raped are then accused of adultery and are accused of horrible things and executed. I mean, this is an absolutely dreadful regime. There's so many people who, despite everything, have gone on the streets, have shown up, have bravely shown their opposition to this regime. What is their position now, do you think, and how likely is it that some better system of government, whatever that is, will come to Iran and that the regime will fall? I'm sure you want it to happen, as I do, Kazra, but how likely is it, do you think, in the current circumstances?
So, I mean, we have to take a step back again and look at this. The elimination of Khamenei has landed a devastating blow to the foundations of the Islamic regime in Iran. There's no doubt about that. In terms of power vacuum emerging, look, they have prepared for this scenario, of course. Khamenei has a secret hidden apparatus, a hidden power structure, which we exposed actually 48 hours prior to his death. We put that in the public domain, information that was really only restricted to the intelligence services before that. They've prepared for this scenario. He has an office, this Beit Rahbari, which is made up of 4,000 core zealots, core cult of personality. It's what he left behind, as well as 40,000 more affiliates. And then the IRGC, Khamenei's ideological armed force, the jihadist force that is plotting terror on British streets and across the world. So they have prepared for this scenario. Now, nonetheless, his elimination has produced a shock to the foundation of the regime. There's no doubt about that. There'll be elite confusion. They've never experienced this before. Crucially, the situation the regime wanted to avoid always was a situation whereby they would have internal protest, internal dissent surging, and an external conflict. We're witnessing this unfold right now. This comes off the back of massacring 40,000 civilians, unarmed protesters on the streets of Iran just a month ago. That revolutionary mood, that revolutionary intent to topple the regime is still very much there. Look at the scenes that are coming from Tehran, people celebrating Khamenei's death, despite the fact that, you know, the IRGC is on the streets, despite the fact that they are being suppressed. So what is going to come next? President Trump has been very clear that the military operation will continue. If we look at President Trump's assertions, he said that the military operation will continue and he is going to clear the path for the Iranian people to reclaim their country. So for that to happen, the strikes will continue. The IRGC's domestic suppressive apparatus, this suppressive apparatus that pervades every aspect of Iranian society, is entrenched within the streets. That needs to be eliminated. I see this as a longer campaign. It's not going to be a matter of days. But for the first time, I think we are starting to see the beginning of the end of this Islamic regime, this tyrannical Islamic regime, which, by the way, if your viewers are watching this, poses a direct threat to us here in the UK. This is a regime with the official slogan, "Death to England." They have been targeting our parliamentarians. They have tried to foment discord within our society, undermine British democracy, and plot terror on our streets. So the fall of this Islamic regime is certainly in Britain's interests.
And what do you make of how Britain has reacted, how Keir Starmer has reacted? And we saw the absolutely sickening spectacle of Mothin Ali, the deputy leader of the Green Party, at a pro-regime event as well. What do you take those two in turn, perhaps, if you would, for me, Kasra? First, the Prime Minister and what the government here has done or not done, and secondly, Mothin Ali and the Green Party.
The Prime Minister right now is failing the British public. He is failing British national security. He is failing British interests. His ministers are refusing to take a side as if they are impartial civil servants. The Prime Minister is effectively refusing to take a side as if he's some impartial bureaucrat. He is the Prime Minister. It is his responsibility to advance and protect Britain's interests and to explain to the British public who elected him why this matters. Explain that this regime poses a serious threat to our country, to our people here in the United Kingdom. But he's refusing to do that. If you ask the average person in the UK, did you know that the regime in Iran is plotting terror on our streets? Did you know that they have an official slogan of death to England? I guarantee you they would say, no, we don't have that information. The Prime Minister has a responsibility to explain the threat to the British public. That is in British public interest, because the threat, as this escalates, is going to reach our shores. There is serious. Khamenei has an office. So he's dead, but he still has an office in the United Kingdom. Still, Starmer hasn't shut that down. He hasn't prescribed the IRGC. More so than ever before, we need to be firm in our position. Starmer needs to be explaining the threat to the British public and explaining what measures, crucially, he is going to take to protect British national security.
And Mothin Ali?
Well, appalling scenes. Does it surprise me? No. We are seeing the Islamist left alliance, not only on our streets now, but trying to take seats in our democracy. This poses a threat to British national security, to Britain's interests. Now, as I said, this is an Islamist left alliance. I believe the Islamists aren't naive. They know exactly what they're doing. The leftists, these far leftists, are naive. Look at what Zach Polanski has been saying. He's, instead of making it absolutely clear that this is a tyrannical regime that has massacred in the worst possible ways 40,000 civilians. Ayatollah Khamenei was responsible for the murders of 40,000 civilians, for overseeing the detainment and hundreds of thousands of Iranians who are being tortured in prison, are being raped, are being treated in the most horrific, inhumane ways. Instead of calling out this regime, Zach Polanski is calling out the elimination of this terrorist. Truly, truly horrific. I believe the Green Party does pose a threat to national security. And Mothin Ali attending a pro-Islamic regime rally in London. He's not some random person. He's the deputy leader of the Green Party.
Kasra, I know this is a very personal struggle for you, that you've family. This is something that you've fought for such a very, very long time. What were you doing last night? Did you celebrate? Did you perhaps join one of those rallies in London or elsewhere that of so many people relieved, happy, hopeful and cautious? I just wondered what you did and how you feel emotionally today.
It is a personal thing, but it's very obviously close to my heart. We've been working tirelessly to help the Iranian people, to make sure that their voice is heard, and to reveal the true face of this tyrannical, evil regime that has the blood, as I said, of hundreds of thousands of Iranians, the British blood on its hands as well. Yesterday, I raised the glass. I had a nice glass of whiskey in between all the interviews that I was doing, in between all the briefings that I was giving. So sadly, didn't manage to join the British Iranian community on the streets celebrating this. But seeing those scenes really brought a smile to my face. I don't think I've smiled, Peter. I mean, we've been talking throughout the protest. I don't think I've smiled properly in the past 2 months. So yesterday, for the first time, and today, I am smiling because the world is a safer place. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the tyrant in Tehran, has been eliminated. And this is something to celebrate. There's still a long road ahead, but we are one step closer to freedom in Iran.
Thank you, Kazra Arabi there, who is Director of Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Research at United Against a Nuclear Iran. Nigel Farage, leader of Reform UK, has said on Twitter, Iran fires ballistic missiles towards Cyprus, home to an RAF base, yet the Defence Secretary, John Healey, says that we're not targeting the island. Really? Does John Healey think Iran just accidentally fired ballistic missiles in that direction? This Labour government is totally rudderless, he says, although the President of Cyprus says Prime Minister Keir Starmer called regarding the ongoing regional developments. He confirmed clearly and unequivocally that Cyprus was not a target. We are maintaining direct communication. All relevant authorities are fully engaged and monitoring developments closely. I'm going to speak to in a second to Shiva Mahboubi, who is a spokeswoman for the Campaign to Free Political Prisoners in Iran. Stay with us for that. And we will, because it's my final Sunday programme, be having a quick word with Tech Up Dave on the return of a couple of lovely features that have been on the programme over the last 4.5 years. So stay with us for all.
Breaking news. Israel says it has launched an attack on Iran as explosions are reported in Tehran. The Israeli defense minister has said his country has launched a preemptive attack on the regime, and the Iranian state media have reported explosions in the east and north of Tehran. The defense minister of Israel has also announced a state of emergency in Israel.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Jason, who says, if, as Starmer says, Iran are a threat, why has he not prescribed the IRGC and kicked out the ambassador? How is this politically inept, weak, indecisive, useless excuse for a Prime Minister still in his job, says Jason? We've been trying diplomacy with Iran for 50 years. It has achieved nothing. Taking this regime out benefits the whole world. Can it be 2029 already? So we can kick this shower out. And Nigel says, against international laws, all we never hear which law. It's sounding like the use of racist, too generic and too overused for its original purpose. Thank you to everybody who has been in touch. I want to speak now to Shiva Mahmoubi, who is a spokeswoman for the Campaign to Free Political Prisoners in Iran, a former Iranian political prisoner herself. Shiva, you must be delighted at what has happened, but perhaps cautious about what comes now.
Absolutely. I mean, we're delighted all in Iran that Khamenei, who can only describe equivalent of Hitler, that finally we got rid of him. And this is a man who is actually responsible for killing hundreds of thousands of people, innocent people in Iran. Of course, it's a complicated situation. It's not as easy as that. If Khamenei goes, it doesn't mean that the system is gone. Obviously, we want to get rid of the whole regime. And now one of the, I would say, worrying issue is the political prisoners and the
and you were a political prisoner yourself. Tell us what happened to you.
Well, like millions of other people in a very young age, first 12 years old and then 16 years old, being tortured just because I was a student activist, meaning I demanded freedom, I was against hijab and all that. So I got arrested, I got tortured, being in solitary confinement for months. Some of my friends were executed. And this is a story of millions of women, people in Iran. And this is why people are celebrating in different cities in Iran that Khamenei has died.
When you see people not celebrating that, when you see the deputy leader of the Green Party in this country, for example, being at a pro-regime protest, when you see people talking about international law, for example, what do you think, especially when it comes to the liberation that your countrymen and women may experience and hopefully will experience very soon?
Well, first of all, I want to ask them, where were they when the regime, just in the last 2 months, massacred more than 40,000 people? Where were they? Why didn't we see any demonstration saying hands off people in Iran? And now they are on the street and saying hands off Iran. Do they mean that hands off regime in Iran? So what I'm trying to say, humanity needs to not to be selective. You can't defend basically one regime who has been killing people and completely close your eyes. Let me give you an image of what happened not 47 years, but in just last 2 months. Like kids as young as 13, 12 years old were arrested, tortured, and even as I'm speaking with you, thousands of detainees are on warehouses outside of the cities. They've been raped, tortured, secretly executed. Families are called to give money for the bullets in their kids' body. Otherwise, they're not going to get the body. What's happening right now in Iran, and especially in the last 2 months, it can only be described as another Holocaust. So I'm asking these people, you cannot be, I'm asking, where were they? Where were they when we asked people to come and support people in Iran?
Yes. You speak very, very sincerely about all of that. What do you want to happen now? What would be the ideal scenario in the next few days and weeks?
So ideal scenario is for all this government, including the UK government, who has not put IRGC on the list of terrorist organization yet, despite all this, to shut down all the regime's embassy, to expel all the diplomats. What we want, the international pressure on the regime and the support for people in Iran. Right now, tens of thousands of prisoners are in prison. According to international law, all the prisoners must be free during the war. They don't have shelter. They don't give them even bread in some of the prisons, like Evin prison. We get news that, in fact, some of these political prisoners been sent to military, basically, centers so they can be used as human shield. And then tomorrow they will say, well, they got killed under the attack. Right now, families in Iran have no news of their prisoners inside prison, and any minute they could be executed secretly. So we want all this government to get their thing together. And I'm really angry because I can see the hypocrisy. I can see that how they shut their eyes, and they basically Antonio Guterres come and speak about, well, you should stop attacking Iran. Where were he when he when he sent the celebration message to the Islamic regime on the anniversary of revolution?
Which was absolutely appalling and denigrated any moral authority he had and the UN's moral authority to a great degree. I want to talk to you more, perhaps this week at some point. I do shows. I'm moving to a show in the evening, and I'd like to have a longer interview with you, but just for the moment we're just going to leave it there. But thank you, Shiva Mahboubi, who is a spokeswoman for the Campaign to Free Political Prisoners in Iran. Thank you to Leslie, who says if Starmer had sent missiles to Iran, he would have U-turned and brought them back. Matt says, I would love you to ask Hamas supporters, if Hamas are only against Israel, why did they not release prisoners of other nationalities? They won't be able to answer. And Gary says Israel is not the only military superpower in the Middle East region, as that earlier caller claimed. Saudi Arabia, at least up until the war with the Gaza, had been massively outspending Israel in defence, 4 times the population of Column, should it need to fight a war. We have spent 2 hours and 52 minutes on Iran. It is the biggest story in the world at the moment, and we will continue to talk about that to a huge degree this week, because I'm moving from my weekend shows on Saturday and Sunday to weekdays, Monday to Friday, 7 till 10. That's going to be my show. And for the last few minutes, we thought it's been such a serious morning, such a serious day. Let's have a little smile on our face. And one man who's often brought a smile to my face over the last number of years is, of course, Tech Up Dave, wearing the same ludicrous shirt that he was wearing the first time we spoke on this programme.
I know.
Yeah.
It's amazing I can still fit in it with the amount of biscuits and fizzy pop we've drunk.
Well, indeed, there has been quite a lot, hasn't there?
Yes. And you were the first main presenter that I had as to Tech Up. And,
really?
Yeah.
How awful for you.
Yeah, I never got rid of you. But anyway, talking of biscuits, we've got some coming up. But first, we know, congratulations, you've got your new show.
Thank you.
And we know why you've got this new show. It's all your professionalism, your skill, and knowing what time of the day it is when you start your show at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Right. A very good morning. This is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much. Oh, no, it's not Talk Drive. That's right. Correct. Well done, Chris. This is not Talk Drive. This is Saturday morning. It's great to be with you. I'm Peter Cardwell here between now and 1 o'clock. Tech Up Dave has his head in his hands. In the first few words, I've got it horribly, horribly wrong. Not the first or last time that happened.
No, well, numbers aren't your thing, are they? Especially the phone number.
We'll continue the conversation, of course, on hate crime incidents, and keep your calls coming in on 03449 4449. Hold on, let me start again. 0344 44449 0344 499 1000. Put your teeth in, Peter.
I hadn't seen that.
Brilliant.
I've been told that was coming.
Superb.
But there we go.
Absolutely superb.
So, yes, you made a terrible mess of that.
Yes.
But the one thing we did do very well were cats. So I think we should bring back, for one moment, Cat of the Week.
It's Cardi B's Cat of the Week.
We did Cat of the Week, didn't we, for quite a while? We did 100 Cats of the Week, I think. So we've got a bonus one today.
So this is 101. And it's nominated by Carol from Liverpool, who's cat mum to Max, the cat. He's a handsome 4-year-old black and white boy. Carol writes and said, I didn't get Max from a rescue centre, but instead we rescued him from a house which was very, very dirty and smelled. So I always say I rescued him.
He was better off out of there and is treated so much better now. He was a lovely little kitten, Carol writes, and can still be a little angel if he wants to, but can be a little bit boisterous at times. But I love him. He loves his food and boxes. Since my dear sister Lynn passed away, he has been a great comfort to me, and he loves strokes, hugs, and little head butts too. And Carol has been a very, very loyal viewer and listener to this programme, and I know she's going to continue that loyalty as time goes on, which is great.
And finally, biscuits. We used to do the biscuit breakdown. So I've found you some odd biscuits to try.
What have you got there?
Here we are, have some limited edition Cadbury's Cream Egg Oreos.
Cadbury's Cream Egg Oreos, wow.
Try those.
Thank you.
They're beautiful. I'm amazed, really, you got through the whole hour without plugging your book, but I'll do that for you. Available in all good bookshops.
Yes.
Usually in the bargain bin.
Brilliant stuff. Well, listen, I'm going to have one of these biscuits with a cup of tea. Thank you so much, Dave. Anything else to say?
No, just thank you and congratulations. I will be staying here at weekends, and you're going off to weekday evenings.
We'll see each other from time to time.
We will bump into each other.
Well, Dave, you've been absolutely wonderful, and you've been there from the start. It's been 4.5 years on the weekends, and I've really, really enjoyed the time that I've had here. Thank you, Dave, and thanks for making a little guest appearance from time to time as well. Great to have you back on the show. I want to thank everyone who, like Dave, Dave Rhodes, the technical operator, Tech Up Dave, who's made the show today. Chris Jacobs has been the producer. Chris and I have been working together for about 2 years, and he has been a great help and has been a fantastic producer. We've had many successes and a few creative differences from time to time, but I appreciate all that he has done for the programme and to make it better. Tommy Bateson, who is the assistant producer, on the front line with the phones, a fantastic person who makes a great cup of tea and very kindly brings in all sorts of delicious things as well. Davis Fang and Luke Vincent have been great visual producers. They have many talents. Luke's main talent is the gossip, of course. He keeps his ear to the ground and eating lots of biscuits as well. Parrick Birmingham, the video editor today, is just a superb person who has a great editorial eye. Dean Spencer, who's down on my list as the part-time weekend editor, hilarious. Dean is a great guy, and indeed Dean will be in the chair for my shows between 7 and 10 this week, actually, for a little while, and before he goes off to pastures new. I also want to thank Gabriella in Calza, who was my producer for about a year. Gabriella did a superb job on the weekend shows. It's not an easy gig getting people to come on, often on Saturday mornings, persuading them on. That's the task that she and indeed Chris Jacobs have faced, and we've had some fantastic contributors, not just this weekend, but every weekend. Chris and Gabriella have got great people on, and Beth Keeley, my great friend, who very sadly is no longer with the station. She's gone on to another job. She was just a fantastic first producer. I should say as well that the management, the opportunity that Danny Morris gave me 4.5 years ago to do the Saturday shows and subsequently the Sunday shows has been an incredible honour to have, and I want to thank him for placing the faith in me to do those, and indeed for promoting me to the role on the weekdays. I'll be on between 7 and 10, 5 nights a week. Lauren Webster, the production manager, makes sure that we have people to do the jobs. She keeps smiling through all the many challenges of her job. And Ricky Freelove and Phil Dave, our content editors, news editors, have been superb, especially backing me. There have been a couple of pretty tough times, actually. There have been a couple of times when I've needed management support for